Okay, we are live, November 15th, 2024. I wanted to start a little early today so that we can all watch the fight. And it's on Netflix, so it has to be real, right? And phones are immediately going to be open, so if you have anything, 505-510-4226, that is the complaint line. And it's also open for constructive criticism and debate on anything we talk about. And speaking of topics, anything we talk about, I have receipts. You go to minds.com/Infinite Plane Society, and I have links and receipts, screen grabs for everything. Oh, anyone wants that song? It's Infinite Gang by Neo Mode, Gucci Flip. I'll make sure I send it out as an MP3 if anybody wants it. One of our listeners who called in several times, and I don't even think we agreed on everything, but he stayed up all night and he mixed a lot of our conversation, his end, into a track, and he sent it to me for use into perpetuity. So I'll go ahead and put that in my notes here. I'll just put it at the very top, Infinite Gang track. I think it's already there for patrons, if you're on Patreon, but if I send it out on Substack, you can all get it. But I've been putting all of the topics on the Insider blog, and I call them the IPR points of interest, Infinite Plane Radio points of interest. We missed yesterday. So yesterday we had The Onion buys Infowars, reportedly backed by the Sandy Hookers. A 33-year-old Blue Origin training manager murders father over election results. As I said, we got to quarantine the 33-year-olds. Lauren Boebert requests info about underwater alien bases at the House UFO hearing. She made an ironic mention of the moon landing being fake and flat Earth as a joke, but underwater alien bases, not a joke. I think Disease X has been released. I've been talking about Disease X since Twitter became X, and how it would signify the isolation of the mind virus, the thought crime, and that it would be attached to the right wing and the right wing memosphere. All the right wing memes are going to somehow gestate something powerful that's going to be so disruptive that the public will cry out for some kind of internet lockdown. And Disease X has been the placeholder name for the next big one, according to the WHO. And I think Disease X is the mind virus. And then we've been talking about all this concerted messaging relating to apes and the rage virus and the Civil War movie being directed by the guy who wrote 28 Days Later. All these things have been connecting. And I think we have seen, I think it has emerged, I think we have seen the Disease X on the world stage. So I have these articles, like People's World has this piece, and it all goes back to Nick Fuentes, which explains why we I think pay so much attention to these individuals, why we can't just leave them alone. I mean, we're not obsessed with any of these political figures, but we have to pay attention to where the Disease X is coming from. So I'm very wary about any of these characters. I think they're all feds, they're provocateurs. Otherwise, Fuentes would have been locked up on J6 with that whole crew. They would have brought him in for that. And so he's been out there pushing what they're calling male supremacy. So Trump terror begins as racist and male supremacists launch mass intimidation campaigns. And, you know, he comes off as a comedian, kind of a parody of extremism. Nick Fuentes seems like a troll. He literally lives in his mother's basement. But his rhetoric went viral. It had to do with this, I think it was, your body's our choice. And some feminists went to his house. One of them rang his doorbell. He sprayed her with pepper spray, pushed her down the stairs, and took her phone. Stomped on it, and then ran inside under the protection of his mother's house. So the story is obviously kind of silly, but it's been taken out of this context to where now these are like marching orders, according to the left, that now the male supremacists are going to show themselves, and it's just the MAGA ban. So he doubles down on this stuff, and he says, well, we want to control everything. Who you marry, where you go to school, do you work? So he just lays out this laundry list of things that he thinks that ought to be controlled. Basically a form of like patriarchal Islam. I've been calling this MAGA ban for some time. These are the same individuals who complain about the age of consent being too high. These are also the incels who express a lot of misogyny. And I think this correlates to the jihadi holy warrior suicide bombers who blow themselves up for the virgins in the afterlife. I think it's a direct parallel. And I've made this connection for a long time, that the 6/11 and it's this number and the execution date of McVeigh, that it's always been the inverse 9/11. And the reason why it's often attached to the far right in all their metascripting is that we have seen the creation of the domestic equivalent of radical Islam, that MAGA ban is a thing. It is their core ideology. And again, 6/11, the inverse of 9/11, all kinds of symbolism, which all suggest the internal domestic versus the alien threat. Remember, Trump was shot at 6/11. They had a moment of silence at 6/11, 84 days later. I mean, these are all little key terms when we're looking at the metascript and how we can analyze it. And it's been pretty consistent, the emergence of the MAGA ban. So we pretty much called it here. And why he's significant? Well, he's America first. And we had someone in our Gilded, I think it was Leo Pirate, connect America First, AF, which is another 1/6, January 6th reference, America First, to Arthur Fleck from The Joker. And he talked about how the disenfranchised groypers would be set loose on society, agents of chaos. And that may be the case. And we also have other instances of basically racism all over again. We've all heard this stuff, but now it's like this mind virus context puts a new light on it. So for example, and we'll go through all these things, and then I want to talk about, obviously, the fight. For example, there was some city council meeting, and during the council meeting, somebody had dropped the N-word, and he said some disparaging things about immigrants. And I think that this is being released on purpose. It's a form of agitation, manufactured outrage.
I just got out of the Senate Judiciary Committee's hearing on my bill that would codify the weapons ban in the Michigan Capitol. And something really disturbing happened. A young man came up to testify in opposition of the bill, and he said the N-word, in addition to saying that the only reason we're passing this bill now is that Donald Trump won.
So they're, again, going into, this is, again, I think manufactured, but this is controlled opposition at work.
And we, in essence, hate white people.
Okay, so we're all familiar with this character and these provocations, but it's not insignificant. And I'm looking how this is being picked up globally. Even Mexican news channels have Nick Fuentes, and they're just playing what he has said. So this is an example of the type of mind virus, the thought crime, which the public will say, well, obviously this is too much free speech. We have to do some kind of regulation here. Got to vax those brains.
The Institute for Strategic Dialogue, sexist and abusive messages against women have surged across social media since Donald Trump's re-election. The harassment has spread to one Stevens Point school.
There have been reports of students at SPASH being harassed through social media. News Channel 7's Sam Deering joins us now in the studio. Sam, what comments are some of those students receiving?
Now, they're just repeating Nick Fuentes. So this is the idea that they are passive receptacles to propaganda, and they get unsafe messages from Telegram and Discord and the manosphere on the far right, and they just catch these mind viruses and they spread them. So here's an example.
Dale, some students across Stevens Point schools have been using the phrase, "Your body, my choice."
Your body, my choice. Now, Nick Fuentes was also the individual who started the meme at Charlottesville, "You will not replace us." So now we have same character in two different instances, being patient zero or super spreader zero for some kind of mind virus epidemic that the mainstream finds problematic. And they give air to this, but this is a phenomenon, and it's been going on basically globally. Male students saying, "Your body, my choice," to female students, and they even cite Fuentes as the source.
Superintendent Corey Hurstbrunner says this has often been directed at female students.
The phrase "your body, my choice" is a trend on social media that has gained traction since the election ended last week. It's a derivative of the phrase "my body, my choice" used by women in support of reproductive rights. It started as a post from influencers like Nick Fuentes.
Now, influencers, as I've been saying, it's really a way of saying influenza, and you're catching his mind flu, his mind virus. The term influencer, I've always thought that's just a strange phrase. Influencer, what designates an influencer? But this is typical demonizing the meme super spreader because people can't censor their own, they can't filter their own thoughts. They have to be protected from things that might offend them. Whatever happened to that thing, I may not agree with what you have to say, but I'll defend your right to say it. Not a thing anymore, apparently. Okay, next. Here's another story of development. If you're waiting for a plot twist, the Russians and cosmonauts are having a little bit of a spat up there in space. Now, last January 19th, the movie ISS came out, and I watched it because I want to see if they could fake the space station worse than NASA. Like, would they have to dumb down their special effects so that NASA doesn't look terrible by comparison? And so I watched that movie with great interest, thinking that it would be a big reveal. The disparity between the special effects in the ISS and the special effects in the movies is worth noting. But last year I watched the movie, and it was all about Russia and America fighting for control over the space program, over the space station. A literal fight, because down on Earth they're actually nuking each other, mutually assured destruction. But there's this order given to both the cosmonauts and the astronauts to take over the ISS, and so they fight it out. It's pretty brutal, in fact. I don't really, it's more of a horror movie than a science fiction. However, right now, Russia and America are clashing over the source of a leak that is on the space station. So again, Newsweek, ISS leak severity, U.S.-Russia clash on the issue. So we'll talk about that. Let's see who's here, and then we'll continue to go through the list of topics. And if you want to call in on anything, it's totally fine. I wanted to start early tonight in case anybody wants to watch the totally real fight, and we know it's real because it's going to be on Netflix. Joined by Armin Reed, JC, Uki, Diana South from DLive, Drew Goldfarb. And again, I'm going to send out the track Infinite Gang, so get on the newsletter. Green Smoke, Michael Cervantes says, what's going to be scripted in the Tyson-Jake Paul fight? You know, Synchronomorpheus found some interesting correlations between Daniel Penny, the strangler of Jordan Neely on the subway, and Jake Paul and Tyson. Like, he has some interesting, what seems to be a parallel narrative. I think everybody wants Jake Paul to get it. I don't know how much of a factor age really is, and then also money. Money is probably a bigger factor than age. Uki says, I just saw an ad for the 1984 The Netflix show. Right, well, 1984 is not even a nightmare scenario. They didn't have to secretly record us and put cameras everywhere because people have been conditioned to surveil themselves and then broadcast it. Privacy is not a thing either. Joined by King Ravana, Masonic Charlatan. King Ravana says, New York City mayor supports RFK Jr. changing the ingredients in poison foods of the USA. Yeah, RFK Jr. is disingenuous, a manipulator. He doesn't believe anything he says. And he just lies. He eats dead bears off the side of the road, but that's fine. Yeah, fake space hair, though, was the question. And we're wondering, how is Tom Cruise going to fake his hair when he goes to space? Is he going to do a buzz cut? Or is it going to be CGI? Or is it going to be hairsprayed and it's going to stick up like Sunita Williams? And by the way, Sunita Williams, this is another story. Speaking of the ISS, they're worried about her health. They say that she's starving up there. Yeah, International Space Station leak could lead to catastrophic failure. So what does a catastrophic failure on the Russian module look like? Well, apparently this leak is, I don't think it's even new. I remember they were fighting over who caused it. They were blaming each other, basically. They said some American astronaut was having some mental breakdown, and she had drilled a hole. They covered it up with their pinky at first. But yes, NASA and Roscosmos disagree on the cause and severity of an air leak in the Russian segment of the ISS, and they worry it could lead to a catastrophic failure. Now, they had a meeting on 1/13, November 13th. NASA's ISS Advisory Committee on November the 13th, which recounted a meeting. I just bring this up because a lot of the predictive programming for the space station falling has the number 113 attached to it, and I could show you many examples. And when I say predictive programming, I mean movies, but also like space junk emergencies. The space shuttle blew up at 1 minute, 13 seconds. Columbia blew up. It was the 113th shuttle launch. Russian engineers believe the cracks are caused by high cyclic fatigue from micro vibrations. Both agencies are in disagreement about what caused it. But anyway, it says that in September, NASA officials downplayed concerns about the leak. The leak is a cause for concern. It says we've taken a conservative approach to close a hatch between the U.S. side and the Russian side during these periods. It's not a comfortable thing, but it's the best agreement between all the smart people on both sides, and it's something we have to live with. Okay, so just in case something goes wrong on the Russian side, they have a hatch. They have a barrier there. There has to be some kind of indicator. Predictive programming-wise, the movie was Russia versus America fighting for control. Let's continue here. Kevin Morning says, Alex Jones claims Onion bought Infowars hours later. The story, they said it was an illegal purchase, not a hoax. They said it was an illegal purchase, like it wasn't approved by the judge. Okay, moving on. Diana South says, Tim, FYI, the sound's been fantastic. Yeah, thanks to all of you who have offered your constructive criticism about the sound. I did some research, and I found out how to fix it. There's a special knob inside of your OBS you have to access. All right, joined by Roxy W. Serene says, good evening. Paradox Penguin on the raft, Clump. Ted Stryker, who often brings in blue wrenches. Many of you have become members in the last month. Appreciate all of you who support the channel in that way. And I do plan to upload a lot more members-only content. I'm introducing one thing at a time. For example, clips. We're doing clips now. So there are clips showing up on YouTube Shorts, on Twitter, and TikTok, and they're getting a lot of traction. Lord Laney says, I swear, controlled op podcasters listen to IPS. They just never really say fake. Yeah, they can get really close to it, but they can't say it. But there's going to be a breakthrough for the whole media skeptic field very soon. After December, I have a feeling. And it has to do with the flat earth thing, which we'll talk about. But I think that it would be great. It would be great if there were some flat earthers to go to Antarctica, as they're supposed to do. And it'd be great if they saw a 24-hour sun. Because the question here has always been about worldview, how it's filtered, and the fact that what we have been shown has consistently been CGI, fakery, paintings, all kinds of chicanery, special effects. So false model is a false model. The ball versus flat debate has always been a controlled dialectic to distract people from talking about, again, the implied argument from authority that anything on the screen is to be treated as real. That's not a skeptical starting point. And we can go ahead and address this in greater numbers when a lot of people who are hung up on flat versus round get off of that. Because it's not a debate you can win, as we'll talk about. Garrett Summer says, Tyson might die tonight. Fake death, wouldn't doubt it. Joined by Esteban Mazel. There were no planes, says good evening. Yeah, there were no planes. There were no jumpers. Nobody died. Nobody cried. There are some people who say there were no planes, but some people must have died. Nope. Assume nothing. Assume zero. And I put out a blog about this the other day. If at any point, when you're looking at a major news event, if at any point you have any indicator that it might be a simulation, and I just say might, because there shouldn't be any indicators if it's real. So if you see any indication it's a hoax, whether it's predictive programming, laughing crisis actors, the usual stuff, then your assumption must be zero until proven otherwise. And this is based on the fact that nobody dies in simulations, in mass casualty simulations. It's not a reasonable assumption to say some people might have died. No, if you can freely admit that at least 2/3 of the thing was a hoax, why would you admit 1/3 to be real? It's very problematic, and it falls apart. It's better, and it's actually logical to assume zero. Let that be your starting point. MSM minus, the subtractive view. Remove from your assessment anything that cannot be proven with facts. You don't have to go carrying someone else's burden of proof. You're not a propaganda mule. Although a lot of truthers essentially become that. Uki says that would be wild, Garrett. He and Tupac could retire together. So that's an interesting statement there, because I saw this post earlier today And I think I put it, I put it up here on my minds.com. This was an article that came out that said, perhaps treacherous of all fame, Tyson got a lethal dose of a very particular American strain of it, whose victims include Elvis, Marilyn, and Tupac. So the article talks about fame and its effect on Tyson, that he has a lethal dose of it. It's a miracle he survived thus far. And they immediately compare him with 3 death fakers. I mean, you might believe Marilyn Monroe really died on August 4th, if you want to. But looking at the total context, no. JFK wasn't shot by Oswald. He was shot by Stanley Kubrick. Happy full moon, says Isabel Ann. Yeah, full moon in Taurus. So, I don't know the significance of that, but I think we do need to consider the astrological in conjunction with the world stage drama. It is interconnected. But anyway, I wanted to get this live stream on before the fight commences. I'm likely going to pay Netflix and watch it. It can't be insignificant. Jennifer Reeves is here. Thank you for joining. Oh, thank you, Esteban. I fixed it. The comments were being cropped off. I had to move the chat module. Truman B3000. Tim, your thoughts on Jim Brewer talking to Flat Earth and NASA lies? He's getting there. He's getting there. I listened to him. He's smart enough. He's funny. We could use someone like that on our side of the screen. Someone who could mercilessly criticize the world stage fakery and call it fake. You know, the word fake, that's the threat. Flat is not a threat. They laugh at flat. They run from fake. And we're the ones carrying the torch for holding media to a consistent standard. Fake until proven real. A lot of people who call out some fakery still assume that the news they agree with is real. That's why you have to get outside of their political horseshoe, which is not easy for people who are invested emotionally, socially into the political war of the day, which right now I guess it's this. I define it as traditional or idealized past versus progressive utopian future. Those are the sides of the political horseshoe. Nicotrauma says, I started eating at McDonald's again after Tim broke the story of their life extension technology in the Big Mac sauce. Well, I wasn't dispensing medical advice or medical misinformation. I just said that if they're a soulless corporation that just wants your money, they're not going to give you something that's going to stop you from being a customer, as in poison. If anything, they're going to put life extension in the Big Macs. Keep you around for a long time. And in the aggregate, get more money out of you. Zinvella says, hopefully Don Petit is up there to fix the leak. Well, if you have a leak, you have a leak. That was his advice. Oh yeah, Kevin Mooring, I have that link. It was Lauren Boebert, the one who got groped at the Beetlejuice while she was vaping. And she brought up Flat Earth and the moon landing being faked, but she was doing it in an ironic way, just to kind of say that the government has her on a list because she's always looking into forbidden things. But she kind of put that out there as a way of saying, what I'm saying isn't ridiculous like this stuff is. And I do have that clip. But we brought up Tupac. Someone brought up Tupac in conjunction with this fight coming up. And I have something here, which I think relates to it. It's Steve Harvey. And he's got this show called, is this Family Feud? Whatever it is. This is Steve Harvey. And the topic is 4 celebrities who some people think are still alive. 4 dead celebrities people think are still alive.
A famous person who died that some people believe is still alive.
Ray Charles.
Ray Charles.
Okay, no, Ray Charles was not it. So the first one is Michael Jackson. So he's going on a list of people who are dead celebrities that are widely believed to be still alive. So he goes to the next one. So Michael Jackson first. King of Pop next.
Alive.
I'm going with Elvis Presley.
Number 1. Elvis Presley.
Okay, Elvis Presley was another one. The King. Someone said Prince, which I think was pretty good, but not very widespread. But it is true. Prince is alive. The next one.
I am.
Okay, Tupac. So he said Tupac. So we got Tupac, Elvis, Michael Jackson, and there's one more. The fourth dead celebrity that some people still think is alive. And you have this 24-year-old. And his answer, and he got it right. Here we go.
The world. Zach, name a famous person who died that some people believe is still alive.
I'm gonna go with JFK.
He went with JFK, and he got it. That was the answer. JFK is somehow considered to be still alive, or believed to be still alive. And that sounds ridiculous, but there's an entire cult devoted to it. It's called QAnon. And Q is JFK. Some believe that Donald Trump is JFK in a costume. I mean, you can believe anything these days. It's totally subjective. It's reality fluid. Okay, let us continue. We'll get into the Lauren Boebert thing. We talked about Musk's Starlink satellites falling to Earth. Again, it's all part of a build-up. I want to find the clip where Lauren Boebert said something about underwater bases. But look at this here. This is Corey Burke murders her father with an ice axe in election night meltdown in Seattle home. Notice that she's wearing a shirt that has a space shuttle and a globe on it. You know, and of course, blue origin. You haven't had any flat earthers do anything crazy like this yet, but the story stood out because it was promoted heavily, and anything that's promoted is worth looking at. It's probably fake. And again, turns out she was 33. If they had taken my advice, that wouldn't have happened. 1/6 wouldn't have happened. The Onion wins Alex Jones's Infowar. So I think that is real. I do have a clip from the CEO of the Onion. But right now, Jones is saying he got it back. I'm finding it harder and harder to care. Like, everything about Infowars is always about how censored they are. It's all just this oppression narrative. It's like, you're not censored. You're acknowledged. See, there's all the censored content creators out there get a sort of indirect promotion that's greater than they would have had if they weren't being quote-unquote censored. It's like a marketing ploy. It's like getting swatted. David Pecker says JFK played the Jimmy Carter role. I've heard that one. Somewhat convincing. He's still around, and that would I think that was Dallas Goldbug who promoted that. David Peck says Tyson gets knocked out first round. Yeah, again, I don't know how stageable something like this is, but let's get into what Synchromorpheus proposed here. So Synchromorpheus had suggested that there's a parallel story going on right now with the Tyson-Paul and the Daniel Penny narrative. So let me bring this up. Synchromorpheus broke down the Daniel Penny Jordan Peele connections to Jordan Neely connections to the Jordan Peele movie Get Out. So the Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson fight was postponed. So it was going to happen months ago. So now it just happens to coincide with the Daniel Penny trial. Coincidence? So if you look here, you've got a comparison of the two. And there is a strong resemblance between the two. The bad tattoos, the hair, they do kind of look the same. Incidentally, the tattoo on Daniel Penny's chest is of Samson wrestling a lion. And now this is an interesting observation. You have Samson wrestling a lion, and then you have the picture of Daniel Penny strangling Jordan Neely. And I think Neely is kind of a reference to the George Floyd event. There's a few other reasons for saying this, and then he's holding his head against his chest, right where the tattoo would be. The connections between Daniel Penny and the movie Get Out are also worth looking through. Both of them, there's this character that looks like him, also a lacrosse player, and also strangles a black character. So there's a very strong parallel. Now here you have, after Mike Tyson had his toe stepped on, he slapped Jake Paul. And Jake Paul responded with, Mike Tyson must die. And again, we just saw the article about the lethal dose of fame, and now we have this.
Ladies and gentlemen.
So that was a slap, but I want to get to the part where Paul responds, and he says,
"What did that feel like, and why did he do that to you?"
I didn't even feel it. He's angry. He's an angry little elf. Mike Tyson, I thought that was a cute slap, buddy, but tomorrow you're getting knocked the f*** out. I'm f***ing him up, Burial. I'm f***ing him up. He hits like a It's personal now. It's personal now. He must die.
all right, he gave his "he must die" war cry. Okay, continuing. Thank you for feeding the crack win, Nicotramus. The IPS appreciates the support. He says, Bitcoin to double in 2025. Take advantage of the olive branches the controllers handed to us. Yeah, it wouldn't shock me. I see a lot of people suddenly looking at it all over again. Kevin Mooring says, remember the penguin in the HBO Sophia when she gets arrested wearing a red outfit like Jill wore on election night? And when Trump was at the White House this week. Okay, yes, and the penguin is very well done. Colin Farrell, masterful actor, incredible work. I'm not going to proffer any spoilers, but there was a lot of stuff in the Batman and Penguin pointing at November the 5th and the election, and there being a flood. Has that happened? You know, could you make the argument that Trump's victory, what appears to be, by some assessments, something of a red wave, could that be a fulfillment of what this movie's projecting? Some kind of a tidal shift? So check this out. How severe is the ISS leak? US and Russia clash on issue. It's mission number 116. Again, the US and Russian technical teams do not have a common understanding of the root cause or severity of the leaks. So a leaky space station. Mazel says WWF vibes. Yeah, that's kind of what I got off of Jake Paul. Okay, moving on. Messianic Charlatan says, there are so many junkies shooting dope in Manhattan subway stations that it half seems like a psyop. Except these are real junkies. Daytime, weekday junkies have been unleashed. Yeah, it could be a sort of, I would call it like lie hop, let it happen on purpose. Like there are some areas here where there does seem to be some kind of psychological warfare that does, in fact, involve real things, making real things worse through negligence or directing the chaos. Frank Murr says tonight's a supermoon as well. So we didn't see the Kraken burning down the screen. I just did a test on it. I don't know why it didn't show up. I'll have to fix it. Okay, continuing. Joined by Lucid Streams. Thank you for joining. We have a list of topics. And let's go ahead and go through.
Now stuck on the International Space Station, Indian-American astronaut Sunita Williams.
This is the thing from Sunita Williams where they're saying that she has health concerns. They think she looks especially desiccated.
Along with Butch Wilmore, continues to face delays in return to Earth. What has become alarming is the seemingly visible signs of weight loss by the astronaut. In the latest pictures released by NASA, Sunita is showing drastic weight loss. Williams has been stranded on the International Space Station.
Now, Butch has no such issue. In fact, he's evidently eating quite well, which is why when he turns upside down, you can see his cheeks flush and hang, and then you can see the vein in his forehead. But you don't see that with her. And that's something they need to consider. You know, these astronauts need to stay in shape, or they give away the game. But she did clarify, concerns about Williams' health surfaced recently after images of her in space suggested she appeared, quote, gaunt, prompting questions about rapid weight loss in space. However, Williams clarified these concerns, stating that despite changes in her body due to microgravity, her weight has remained stable. So she downplayed it. Just a quick quote from Sun Tzu, the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. we talk about the fakery, that they don't really kill people, that everything's fake. And when I say everything, I mean every major historic event that in some way transforms our global paradigm, like moon landings, like pandemics, like war. A lot of these things are staged in the theater of Psywar. And the purpose of it is, of course, the purpose of these controls is that we have been conquered. And the conquerors write history. And the way they do so is through fake news. So they write history day by day. Total time control. Like the design authority in Megalopolis. But subdue the enemy without fighting. I think that's just an important point to consider here when we were talking about this system of what I call worldview warfare, but which is essentially about using the media itself as the primary weapon, the TV. Not the things on the TV, not the big scary mushroom cloud on the TV, but the TV itself. So Sylvester Stallone. Now this might be a tie-in because we're talking about boxing, we're talking about this fight. This might be a tie-in. So maybe you're seeing what I'm seeing here. Did Apollo, was his name Apollo Creed in... Yeah, this character. So he's in Rocky. And Sylvester Stallone is hanging out with Trump right now at Mar-a-Lago. Now, does Apollo Creed die? Like, what's the story here? Because there's something about this story. Sylvester Stallone went over to Trump's Mar-a-Lago, and he gave some remarks. And he said, quote, "When I did Rocky, the first image was a picture of Jesus that says, Resurrection AC Club. Resurrection AC Club. He found a church that had been converted into a boxing ring. So the image pans down from Jesus onto Rocky being hit. And in that moment, he was a chosen person. And that's how I began the journey. The man was going to go through a metamorphosis and change lives just like President Trump." So this is Stallone talking about Rocky as he relates to Trump. He says, regarding Trump, this is at the America First Policy Institute Gala. "We are in the presence of a really mythical character. I love mythology. And this individual does not exist on this planet. Nobody in the world could have pulled off what he pulled off, so I am in awe." So Sylvester Stallone talking about Jesus, Rocky, Resurrection AC, kind of antichristy, and then talks about Trump being a mythological character. And this is all against the backdrop of the fight tonight between Jake Paul and Mike Tyson. President Donald Trump tweets Photoshop picture of himself as Rocky Balboa, and this was back in 2017. This is an old meme of Trump as Rocky, and it always stood out to some people as strange. How are you connecting him with Rocky? But now you have Resurrection, and Resurrection AC, there's something like that. So I think there might be some kind of connection here. We'll continue to watch, but Kevin Morey says Tyson Trump, WWF actors. Kevin says Tim Apollo wore the flag shorts like Trump's avatar. Okay, well, I'm going to move on from this topic for now, but we will be following the fight pretty closely. A Mexican news channel, Milenio, talks about Nick Fuentes and his Your Body, My Choice, and they air the clip. And, he's been doxxed. People have been going to his house. He maced somebody. I don't know if they're going to press charges. But I've been talking about this for one reason. This is Disease X. And Disease X is an isolated mind virus that is so bad for the commons. Not just America, where we have high tolerance for free speech, but globally. So what they're doing is I think they're running psyops to gain public support for a wider array of censorship tactics. And by censorship, I just mean keeping unauthorized ideas out of the commons, a sort of a quarantining of the internet. How they're going to do this, I don't know precisely. However, I have some ideas. In fact, the guy from The Onion, the CEO of The Onion, was talking about going after podcasters now that Alex Jones has been taken care of. And I thought, that's kind of a big reveal. And one other thing, The FBI had to issue a statement today over racist text messages that were being sent to people. Text messages have been expanded to high school students. Recipients were, this is all just, I think, part of this idea that, okay, it's out of control. The internet is facilitating the spread of mind viruses. And by the way, the Sandy Hook documentaries are blowing up as a result of this stuff. So let me just play a short clip from the Mexican TV news.
Ha pronunciado incluso en contra de la vacunación.
The feel when we control your bodies. Hey, bitch, we control your bodies. Guess what? Guys win again. Men win again.
So this Poe, this parody of extremism, this self-professed incel who has advocated for the lowering of the age of consent is being taken very, very seriously. And so this has gone mega viral. The reactions are piling up. There's all kinds of reactions. And the violent rhetoric, by the way, is also a problem now, where there are individuals talking about, like this guy, I think he actually said, burn the guy's house down.
I immediately searched for videos. When I first heard that Nick Fuente's house was on fire, I immediately searched for videos of it and found out there are none because it didn't happen. Then I Googled it for news stories of it happening and it didn't happen. When we see something like that, we need to fact check it before we spread misinformation. When we make a mistake like that, we need to correct it. His house did not burn down, and we need to correct that.
All right, there you go. That's a little beyond just stochastic. So here's Lauren Boebert talking about secret alien underwater bases. And I don't think this is a dumb topic. It's far more likely that the ocean is deep space. That if there is any kind of, quote, alien presence, it's more likely subterranean or beneath the ocean than up above. Whatever you think the shape of the world is, the outer space alien thing is not only it's nonsensical. I mean, if we have the solar system as they say, no, I think it's just too big. The economics of traveling across galaxies to visit some primates doesn't make sense. Although the other idea that they're already here makes a lot more sense. But let me go ahead and play this.
Counts of UAPs emerging from or submerging into our water, which could indicate a base or presence beneath the ocean's surface.
I don't know about a base, but as I mentioned, I had a different source entirely describe this pretty extraordinary footage that exists of orbs, of an orb coming out of the ocean and being met by another orb.
Some would say that there's multiple hotspots where we see frequent activity. So in your investigations, have you come across any data or visual evidence like sonar readings or underwater footage of these UAPs?
I have not beyond what's in the report.
All right. Roxy says Nick Fuentes is being sarcastic, isn't he? He is and he isn't. Like comedians will say things with plausible deniability. Oh, I'm just a comedian. And he walks that line where he's funny in the same way as a comedian would be delivery-wise, but he's still carrying memes that he takes seriously. I think he's a provocateur. I don't think he really believes it, but his views are, in fact, representative of MAGA ban views, which are really just a remake of like a very patriarchal Islamic take on things. So even though he sounds like he's exaggerating, it is what we have been hearing being promulgated among the far right. And this is all over the place. Like Matt Walsh pulls over. I mean, he's got a wife and kids. He's got his family. But one day he just pulls over in his car and he angrily rants about how the age of consent is too high and women are getting away and they're going to college and getting jobs and becoming taxpayers. And that's bad. And they're not having enough babies. And then I hear the same thing from every single right-wing influencer. They're all saying the same thing. And that's because they're all interconnected. It's actually a concerted front. It's a unified front, controlled opposition movement, where I think they want to intentionally create the perception of this MAGA ban that must be stopped. Domestic violent extremism, but from within. Kevin Mooring says, I have the tweet from the principal that day. They were doing a drill. Alex has it. I've sent it years ago, so he was the first person to say it was fake AF. Nice. The problem with that event is that people look at that as though it's an anomaly. If you could talk about that, describe why you question it, you should also be able to say the same thing about Littleton, Parkland, about the one in Nashville, the one in the Charleston, where those 9 were shot in the church. Like, you should be looking at every single shooting event with the same set of criteria, the same level of skepticism. And I don't see that. And I find it to be confusing when someone like Wolfgang Helbig says that Parkland is real, or they look at these things as though they have to debunk it. It's like, no, the whole thing is, it's a forest of fakery, but they have you focus on one event to the exclusion of the others, so you don't get the big picture. So Alex Jones's job is to prevent you from seeing the big picture. He never talks about any other event. If he was truly trying to overturn the psychological warfare entertainment complex, he would be burning down every fake event one after the other, using his platform to call out the fakery that would expose the conspiracy. It would actually show the inner workings of this thing, that it's not just actors and a small group of Democrats pulling off a hoax to fool the right-wing media and the world. No, this is actually coming from the very top. And it involves law enforcement, first responders, hospitals, coroners' offices. You got the Department of Homeland Security. These are simulations. They're not false flags. So conspiracy theorists like Alex Jones, and RFK even said this, they give you the false flag interpretation, which is fake. They say, oh, it was real, but it was antipsychotics that made him do it, SSRIs, antidepressants, which is their way of blaming the state. And it doesn't subtract anything. It accepts at face value this atrocity happened. So his job is to keep people thinking about second shooters and government black ops so they can take your guns. His job is to prevent you from seeing the forest of fakery. So again, that event, it's purposeless to talk about it if you're not willing to talk about it within the wider context. So New York Post has covered this. Women dox and vow revenge against Nick Fuentes. Even The View is talking about Nick Fuentes.
Craziness, and that was said by Nick Fuentes on social media.
I don't know who that is.
He's a Nazi.
Now, again, I bring him up because of his position. And some people say, well, nobody knows who he is. Are you sure about that? This was Ye's campaign manager, had dinner with Trump. He was the guy who started the "You Will Not Replace Us" movement. So he's not insignificant, and he's obviously a Fed. There's no other. This is not an organic character. Okay, let us continue here. Elon Musk is hiring for his Doge task force. So it is real. Department of Government Efficiency. Maybe he should look at NASA. A lot of money going into that. He could expose the fakery at NASA. Oh wait, no, he can't. So there was a podcast or a live stream called Here for the Truth of Space Busters. I've never seen Space Busters, but Lucid Streams had noted a comment that mentioned us. I love Steve, and Steve knows I'm one of his biggest fans, but Joel, watching you squirm around when Steve was talking about the Middle East drama actually being real and not a complete mutually beneficial hoax, IPS style, where both sides are in on it to milk the realm, was priceless. Squirm away. Yeah, exactly. All of these psyops necessarily involve both, quote, sides of the media. There's no meaningful distinction between Infowars and CNN. I'm going to play this short clip. This is Trump and Biden hanging out in the White House. There's something ominous about this. There's a crackling fire, but it's right behind Trump. Sort of like a scene right out of Devil's Advocate or something.
Elect and former President. Thank you. Donald, congratulations. Thank you. And looking forward to having like we said, smooth transition. Do everything we can to make sure you're accommodated, what you need. And we're going to get a chance to talk about some of that today. So good. Welcome. Welcome back.
And, thank you very much. And politics is tough.
Now you see this? I'm just pointing it out that he's positioned right here where he's in front of the fire and it's crackling. And there he is shaking Biden's hand. I don't think there are many accidents on the world stage. I think there's a message here. Not quite sure what it means, but it seems to be foreshadowing. Maybe a foreshadowing some impending plot twist. Isabel Ann says, the aliens are here, you can't see them, but we still need your biometrics to confirm you're human. Kevin Mooring says, remember when Nick and Milo and Kanye West were on Tim Pool? Yes. These characters are all uninteresting, and they're foolish clowns. It's a caricature. But they all exist in the same fictional universe, which is why they all bolster each other. They hype each other up. Okay, so NASA, catastrophic failure. So it could be the case that the Russian side of the ISS has some major failure because they haven't fixed the leak. And just in case, NASA has closed a hatch between America and Russia. Now, here's a short clip of RFK Jr. It's kind of funny. They asked him about Jeffrey Epstein and why we shouldn't think it's a big deal that they hung out together. And he says, basically, well, I've hung out with a lot of people, like Harvey Weinstein, O.J. Simpson, Bill Cosby.
Yeah. So, and you run into everybody in New York. I mean, I knew Harvey Weinstein. I knew Roger Ailes. I knew O.J. Simpson came to my house. Bill Cosby came to my house.
Yeah. What about Diddy? But I mean, his deflection from, oh, you've been hanging out with this human trafficker pedo is to say, oh, well, I was also hanging out with Weinstein and the guy who murdered his ex and his girlfriend and Cosby who put something in the pudding. I mean, it's just bad. The guy's terrible at his self-promotion. Okay, we talked about Tyson being compared to Elvis, Tupac, and Marilyn as having, quote, got a lethal dose of a very particular strain of fame whose victims include Elvis, Monroe, and Tupac. Now, this is a little creepy. Jake Paul's mom, and I saw the video, she's hugging Jake Paul, and she says that she's going to kill Mike Tyson. Yep. Jake Paul's mom threatens to kill Mike Tyson after the slap. Jake Paul says Mike Tyson must die because of the slap. So we have these two instances, but his mother saying that she would kill Mike Tyson for him. It made me think of this. This is Jason Voorhees and his mom, where she comes back as a ghost later and tells him to go kill those bad teenagers who made fun of him at Crystal Lake. And she's always been there from the very beginning, goading him. She was the original killer. If you've seen the series, you know what I'm talking about. But Jason's relationship with his mother came to mind when I saw Jake Paul's mom hugging him and saying, I'll kill that guy for you. He's like, no, I'll kill him, Mom. Yeah, it's pretty twisted. E4 Rocket says, I heard Jake Paul was... Yeah, I don't know. Somebody tried to tell me Andrew Tate's a woman. And I'm like, wow. So you're saying that a woman just basically dominated male kickboxing for a few years? I think that there's a lot of disinformation. And the way you can tell is the lack of facts. A lot of people believe things that aren't substantiated by any facts. It's all just conjecture. And if they don't make any effort, if there's not any sort of due diligence here to obtain the facts to prove their claims, you can just dismiss what they say. As Christopher Hitchens said, that which is asserted with no evidence can be dismissed with no evidence. So all these claims that, Trump is a woman and all these things, it's like, come on, bring some evidence. You're not going to convince me that at 60 years old, he gave birth to Barron Trump. Like, come on, that's disinformation. We should be past that. Kevin Mooring says, crazy. If you look at the Tyson slap stage, it's Death Rose Colors, a.k.a. Pac. Interesting. Well, there's got to be something. There's got to be something. Yeah, that's funny. Unmitigated Mind says, what about it? I've got all kinds of slimy friends. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think it's funny that RFK Jr. got exposed as the guy that left the dead bear in Central Park on the bike trail. Like, he's just offhandedly talking about it to, like, Roseanne Barr. It's like, yeah, I found a dead bear. I was going to eat it, but I thought, it might just be funny to put it on a bike trail. So he puts a dead bear on a bike trail, And there's a picture of him doing it. Like there's a picture of him eating the barbecued dog. But there he is with a dead bear at a bike trail. And then there's old news stories about this bear on the bike trail. And they connected it to him years later. So if anything, that's one of the good things that came out of his campaign. We solved that one. It's like an unsolved crime. Okay, this is what I was going to talk about. This is the Onion CEO, Ben Collins. He used to be a NBC News reporter, and he always talked about disinformation and extremism. And he says, quote, "We're going to go after every facet of alternative media." He says he's going to target TikTok influencers and podcasters.
The Onion owns Infowars. Look, we're going to go after all of every facet of alternative media that is trying to get you addicted to stupid stuff. There is a whole world of podcasters and TikTok influencers who have some really curious ideas of the world. And I also think that we're learning right now that their followings are just as big, if not bigger, than traditional celebrities. And they've gone unmocked. They got a free pass to this point. And we don't think that that's fair.
Well, bring it. I mean, honestly, I look forward to it. I look forward to any kind of attempts to refute what we're saying, but they're not going to come after us. They said alt media. And Infinite Plane Radio is not alternative media. You have mainstream media, alternative media, and then you have what I call the off-world stage perspective, because all media, mainstream and alternative, exists within the fictional universe, which we describe here as the world stage, which is essentially a model of the world. People watch the news, they get their model updated, and oftentimes they don't consider how much malware is being entered into their minds. Hyperstitions, lies, and propaganda, psychological operations, simulations, so much so that the consensus model that we collectively agree is the one has in many ways diverged from the real thing to the point where we are in a simulation. And if you call out any aspect of the model that doesn't match the real thing, they call you a conspiracy theorist. So the conspiracy theorists are correct in a few ways. At least they know that they're being lied to. But they're wrong in their methodology. And the way I describe it is the mainstreamers are those who are watching the world with the screen right in front of them as something of a window to the world. So their own experiences are secondary to what they see on the screens. I describe them as having their noses pressed up against the screen. And that's mainstream mediation. The people who go alternative media don't believe it. They think there's something wrong with what they're presented with, and so they question it. But the way they question it is they build onto it, what I call MSM plus. Something doesn't look right about this Trump ear shooting. Must have been a second shooter and the deep state and George Soros and an inside job. So then they have all these rabbit trails that add on to the story. They never subtract. And the subtractive view is to say that the screen itself is no longer a window. We can't trust it. It's not objective. It's a filter. So we step back and we reject any claims that aren't attended by evidence. So the skeptical view is the suspension of judgment until we have more facts, oftentimes leading to non-belief. But it's an informed non-belief. It's not a knee-jerk reaction just calling the opposite guy's news fake, but rather we know why we don't believe what they in fact do believe. We have reasons. We have reasons for non-belief, and they have unreasoned belief, low information believers. There's a qualitative distinction here, and this applies all across the board. So we are not alt media. Alt media is being set up for destruction. Elon Musk is the fall guy for free speech. X is the vector for the mind virus, and he's part of the problem. He's the creator of it. He is the scapegoat. That's why you're also seeing a lot of bad press about SpaceX and how his Starlink satellites are ruining the night sky for astronomers, how they're falling down. And that, of course, is the correlation between mind junk and space junk, which is one individual, too much money, who advocates, capitalism, who embodies this system, is a threat as an individual to the commons. Kind of like one individual has a bowl of bat soup that hasn't been heated properly. he gets sick and he spreads the virus to the whole world. So one individual can destroy the collective. Well, Musk is going to destroy the collective, cyberspace, and low Earth orbit, outer space. So this is all a big psyop, if you ask me. All these various attempts at censorship, it's all part of this worldview curation. They want to reduce the number of content, not necessarily reduce content creators, but they want to minimize those who don't communicate from within the box. Like, if you're in the box, it doesn't matter if you say something that's accurate factually. Like, there are many people who say that Trump faked, they call it blue anon, like QAnon. There's like a left-wing version of conspiracy theorists. They call themselves blue anon because they're anonymously talking about these things. And they think Trump staged his ear piercing by the AR-15. However, they also think he's a murderer because they think that the death of the fireman was real. So they have the right answer with the ear thing, but they think the other thing is real. So that's what I mean by saying, since they're in the box and their base assumption is that it's real until proven fake, they will never arrive at the right answer. And you can't prove the fireman's death was fake because you don't have anything to look at. You just accept it on faith. You'd be tasked with proving a negative when the burden of proof should have shifted the instant you discern the ear was fake. That's why I say assume nothing. Whenever there's, especially a bloody guardrail, whenever there's a death toll, if there's any indication of a hoax, it is all there for a hoax. And there are many reasons why, which we will talk about. Isabel Ann says, onion etymology is Latin for one or unity. Interesting. You could describe the world stage in a way, something as an onion. I mean, it is like even like Russian dolls. I mean, it's a box with boxes within. And that's the problem with alt media, is that it exists as a subset of the mainstream. It's not outside of the mainstream. The only outside perspective is the one that suggests that both sides are propagandizing the masses. Primarily, that is their purpose. Even if they're telling the truth, they're doing so from within a frame of reference that is essentially a self-reinforcing closed system of information. Okay, let's continue. So that's the Onion CEO talking about going after podcasters and TikTok influencers. Now the fight's going to be on in a few more hours. I will likely watch it, and if anything does happen, I will likely start a new live stream and we will immediately talk about it. So let's just go ahead and pre-auto hoax it. Nobody dies in psyops. So if there is an apparent death, well, it's fake. Just preemptively call it fake. Still waiting on final word with Infowars. He apparently got it back. The auction wasn't authentic. We'll find out. The state of the flat earth question in 2024. I posted this the other day. Agnosticism and informed skeptical non-belief as the way forward. So this article, I posted it on timosman.blog. Pertains to what's going to happen next month when a group of individuals who believe the earth is flat are going to Antarctica to observe a 24-hour sun. And what does it mean? They call this the final experiment, which is really just an observation. But if they go and they see a 24-hour sun in Antarctica, what does it mean for the topic of flat earth? What does it mean for the apps? What does it mean for the various churches and preachers out there who preach the biblical flat earth model? And my point on this thing, my position has always been, it's premature to go with the model, but there's an error here. And that's what this article is about. There's an error in both, quote, sides are relying on sources that the other side disagrees is objective. And this is where I think the crux of it is. One side gets their view from the Bible, one side gets it from the TV. And I'm saying that these are actually the same thing, that the television is just the latest iteration of the, quote, holy book, the all-encompassing world view that is the foundational frame of reference for everybody who accepts it. XG says, will it destroy Dearth's app? Well, deep inside the rabbit's hole said that he won't go to Antarctica because he believes that the flat earthers are going to be tricked by a guy in a helicopter with a simulated sun dangling beneath it, flying around them in a circle, which is ridiculous. It's preposterous, just to even unpack that. Like, does the guy in the helicopter know the earth is flat? And he's like, oh, we got to trick the people that know. I mean, that's some cartoonish stuff, some cartoonish reasoning. But the flat earth model has always been doomed for the same reason that the ball earth model is questionable. Insufficient information. So we subtract the stuff that can't be verified. You subtract the fake moon landing. You subtract the space station because it's just a reality TV show filmed here on Earth. You subtract the space salami, the admitted fakery, and other evidence of fakery. You subtract all of that. You no longer have enough information to believe the world is exactly as they describe it to be. I have many examples of things that would suggest that they are giving us a facade, that a false front, but the thing of it is, it's not about shape at this point. It's a premature discussion. At this point, the difference is the ball earth model is accompanied by questionable evidence from a dubious agency, NASA, and the flat earth model lacks information, which they fill in with Bible verses and religious myths, which isn't information. It's not evidence. So this is why this is an engineered dichotomy, in my opinion. The cosmography defined by traditional belief systems rooted in traditional religious paradigms, or the modern religion of mass media with its faith in science. The popular flat earth debaters are Bible believers, which is a red flag for me, because they're anti-science, and anti-science will not arrive at the truth. Science is, properly described, it's a methodology. It's about testing claims that are falsifiable if new information arrives that debunks them. And if you are not willing to go to Antarctica to test your own model, then you've stepped outside of science and you've entered into a belief system. And that's kind of why I'm saying that it's an important development that we have this trip to Antarctica, which may likely provide a 24-hour sun. Now, if they do, so just hypothetically, flat earthers go down deep, deep south, hanging out with the penguins, and they see the sun, and it's up for 24 hours. What does that mean? It doesn't mean, we'll start with what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean that NASA's been telling the truth. It doesn't mean the moon landing's real. It doesn't make the space station real. It doesn't make SpaceX real. It doesn't validate special effects. So this conversation has been stagnant between two poles representing tradition and progressivism, literal belief in mass media provided versions of things versus a faith-based religious construct. So you have an untested flat earth model with a lot of faith holding it up, and then you have the globe model, which is only tested by these agencies who provide us with crap special effects. So none of them can be trusted. Neither can be trusted. And just because one is debunked doesn't mean the other's true. NASA's presentations are fake doesn't mean the Earth is a disk with a dome over it as per Bible, nor does it validate Christianity. It doesn't mean that all of the claims of Christianity are now valid. No, it doesn't mean that. So there is a third option, and this is where the conversation will have to go. From day one, the IPS has said, and this has been our position, that's what Infinite Plane Society's title comes from, that both of these models are premature. That the shape is a red herring to distract us from the topic of how we get our worldview. Do we get it from dusty old holy books or the black monolith, ubiquitous screen with its projections? And my answer has been both sides need more information. This leads us to reject the flat earth and the establishment's blue marble concepts. So it's about two worldviews. One is filtered through old media. One is filtered through modern mass media. And just for the record, The IPS got behind Mad Mike Hughes, and he called me up. You can read about it in the New Yorker. The article is called "Looking for Life on Flat Earth." This is in 2018, "Looking for Life on Flat Earth," where Mad Mike Hughes called into the podcast. And at the time, we used to have 400, 500 live listeners. It says, Hughes, this is from the New Yorker. In 2017, he called the Infinite Plane Society, a live stream YouTube channel that discusses the Earth's flatness and other matters, to announce his ambitions and ask for the community's endorsement. So he had a plan, as it describes here, to launch a rocket from a balloon, a raccoon, and go 70 miles up. So we were behind that. We were also behind a group called Exploring Again, who had an Antarctic expedition planned for 2020, even sooner, in fact. It didn't happen for several reasons, but we have always been advocating more information, exploration. So if the spinning ball Earth does end up being the actual situation, it doesn't make the news real, doesn't make all the school shootings real, and it doesn't make space travel real. As of right now, we can unequivocally state that space travel is still only supported by science fiction and special effects. Space junk is still a psyop. Low Earth orbit? Well, there's nothing in low Earth orbit if such a place exists. The existence of the space program globally only presents us with conspiracy by all governments to keep the collective of all mankind in a controlled paradigm. I recently reviewed that movie, Fly Me to the Moon. Fly Me to the Moon reveals in a rom-com that the government faked the moon landing to trick the Russians to win the space race, to assert the power of capitalism over communism, but it was a propaganda war. And what I'll emphasize is that that's true. Apollo 11 was a propaganda victory. But the moon landings were not faked by Russia to fool the Russians. They were faked to fool mankind. And Russia is in on it, as are all the other countries supposedly antagonistic toward one another here on the Earth. And to reiterate, the space program's purpose, its true purpose, is not to travel to distant paradises, but it's to control the space between our ears. The space program's purpose is to control your inner space. And finally, only by seeking and finding more information can we arrive at a model. This means more information outside of what the space agencies provide, certainly outside of religious literature. But this isn't information that we can just gather open source, can't just Google it. So I'm glad that someone's going deep south. Somebody still needs to go to the North Pole, debunk Mount Meru, or take a picture of it, circumvent this supposed 33-mile circumference black rock at the center of it all. According to Mercator, the Mercator projection, in a letter he wrote to his BFF, John D. Okay, so one more thing. The 24-hour sun may validate a ball model, but it in no way validates space fakery. And it's notable that all pro-globe debaters, without exception, all of them, Fight the Flat Earth, Simon Dan, McToon, they're all 100% true believers in the fake news. None of them exhibit any skepticism toward fake news. Of course, they don't believe in the conspiracy theories. They hate, or rather disbelieve in alternative news. But they're all in the box. They don't acknowledge, I'm not saying they don't believe in, because these things exist. They don't acknowledge the existence of psychological operations in mainstream news. They don't acknowledge the significance of fake news or the fakery. Another reason why those debates are pointless. You're talking to people who are reality compromised at best. So to recap, if Earth is a ball, 1, we haven't seen a picture of it. 2, orbiting satellites still aren't real, and this includes the space stations. 3, space travel still has not been demonstrated to exist. 4, there's a collusion between government and media globally to present a facade that may or may not comport with the real thing. They may be hiding more land, for example. Within the scope of the globe, maybe it's not as much water as they say. maybe they're hiding something in that respect. They're hiding Atlantis with shitty special effects. 5, the question round or flat should be replaced with open or closed. This would reveal that we live in a closed informational system. And until we confront the mental terrain and how we acquire this internal map of the world, the shape is futile to speculate about. Again, that's my article here. The State of the Flat Earth Question in 2024. Lloyd Miller said, I'm always looking for evidence that the Earth is not a globe or the solar system is a myth. I'd love an experiment to disprove the globe. The establishment theory is probably right if the evidence is congruent. They say it, but how many for themselves have made the astronomical measurements? 99% of us don't have the equipment. 99.999 don't have the equipment. It's a life-consuming project. Finding such evidence of no globe, no solar system would put conspiracy theories on the front burner. Now, the problem with this is that the people who debate on behalf of the Ball model do not acknowledge special effects. They rule it out. So their model is not falsifiable. That's why I say it's a religion. Nasatology is a religion. And when I look at this artwork in space, I mean this deep space photography, I just say it's religious artwork. It's the heavens, as supplied to you by the new state religion, the World Church of Nasatology and Scientism. Priscilla said, reasonable thinking about how current limited choices shape our perspective. Definitely there's another shift to the current paradigm. Agreed. I think that's a valid point. That round or flat, without talking about the role of fakery, which is everything. You know, there are people on there debating on the merits or trying to debate science. Like you have flat earthers trying to say to someone who has a degree in physics that they know better. Or they talk to pilots and they say, well, if you're flying, you should have to dip your nose down so you don't fly off into space, because it's like, what are you talking about? That's not how it works, one. And two, you're not on a level playing field when you play by their rules with their built-in assumptions that everything on the screen is evidence. And that's what I'm rejecting. I look at the terrible reality TV show they call the ISS. I look at these individuals pretending to float. That's not evidence of zero G. Nicotroma says, Infowars is a major split in society and the biggest guardrail to protect the myriad of lies in our realm. I don't see it going anywhere. Yeah, no way. It's all just drama. I mean, nobody cared. It got auctioned off. Nobody cared. So now Alex Jones goes back in the office carrying a sink, imitating Musk walking into Twitter, saying that he got it back, and I don't think anybody really cares. I personally don't know anyone who follows that stuff unironically or for the purposes of informing themselves about the political horseshoe and what ideas are being promulgated. I look at it from that perspective, like essentially media analyst, and I don't look at them as separate from CNN. It's just the biggest pipeline for the controlled opposition talking points. But you're supposed to see his persecution as evidence that he's right and they're trying to shut him up. It's very basic, and I'm actually kind of tired of it. We're joined by Thirst for Truth. Thank you for joining. Lucid Stream says, my friend went to Antarctica, did a job as a builder. They got picked up from Christchurch by the Army. 24-hour sun. Yeah, Christchurch is one of the 5 gateway cities to Antarctica. John Lebsock says, Simon is a shill. Well, just so you know this, let's say they go and they present a 24-hour sun. There are going to be people trying to figure out ways to make that work on a flat Earth model, which is fine. But if you're not going to go out there, it's just speculation. The more pressing issue is, I think the more pressing question is open or closed system, because we have to expose the closed system, the false model, the model as such. That's the problem here. The Matrix is in your mind. You know, the Matrix movie describes this simulation. And yeah, we are in a simulation. And it's the mistaking of, the conflating of your internal model with the real thing, which is generally not a bad thing. These should be congruent. Your concept of the world should match your experiences of it. However, we're in a state of hypermediation, and our worldview is consistently being augmented by the powers that be with, we'll just say, God constructs. A steady stream of propaganda that props up a sort of a, I say simulation, we'll just say a exaggerated and more nightmarish version of the real thing. Like in my world, space junk's not a threat. In my world, I'm not afraid of nukes. I'm not a xenophobe, for example. But if I was a true believer in Fox or even just Infowars, I'd be xenophobic if I truly believe this stuff. I'd be wearing masks and a tinfoil hat. Nicotrama says, I'm watching Netflix now, crappy fights, that's why MMA is popular. Yeah, they're not expected to hit the stage for a couple more hours. But I knew a lot of you would want to see it, and I want to see it because of the connections with Rocky and Daniel Penny. So we talked about disease X spreading wider, this time taking on the trappings of toxic masculinity, which all ties into Andrew Tate, who's also a construct, likely a fake character. Andrew Tate is the villain in the movie called Speak No Evil. And the cover art for Speak No Evil, and again, the actor who portrayed the antagonist said that he based his character on Andrew Tate. And they had no idea that when the movie came out, that Andrew Tate would be under house arrest and all these crimes would be revealed. But consider this too. Speak No Evil is saying don't spread mind viruses. Don't spread toxic masculinity. Don't spread sexist memes like Nick Fuentes. So I think there's a double meaning here, and it has the sign of silence. Like I saw the same thing with The Mask. When The Mask came out, I said, okay, this is going to be foreshadowing a new era of censorship. And I think Speak No Evil, as far as the Metascript goes, is conveying this idea of, again, that you have to, at your own individual level, decide not to spread this stuff. Mask your own mind. Sylvester Stallone introduced Trump at a conference today, and there seemed to be a little height difference between them, says Angst G. Yeah, we actually talked about that. We talked about the talk because he was comparing indirectly, I'd say, he was comparing Donald Trump to Jesus Christ and made reference to resurrection. I'll go ahead and pull that up again. So here we have Rocky Balboa standing in front of an image of Jesus, and that's because in the movie, the gym was called Resurrection AC. And AC, I think it stood for some athletic conditioning. I think it stands for Antichrist. But Resurrection AC, there's Jesus, there's Rocky, the sun is shining on him. So this is some obvious religious iconography. And in his speech, where he's talking about Donald Trump, and again, Donald Trump used to share images of himself as Rocky. This is back in 2017. But in his speech there, this is what Rocky said, what Stallone said. When I did Rocky, the first image was Jesus that says Resurrection AC. The image pans down to Rocky being hit at that moment. He was a chosen person, and he went through a metamorphosis and changed lives just like President Trump. And then regarding Trump, he said, we are in the presence of a mythical character. And I agree. Trump is a historic personage. He's an amalgamation of a lot of different characteristics, traits. He's a mashup. He's a Frankenstein's monster. Donald Trump is a real breathing flesh and blood person, but he's portraying a role, a mold. There's a character that was there that existed before he did. It's not a stretch. We can provide examples of predictive programming for Trump on the world stage as early as 1958 or 1898 if you want to go back to the Ingersoll Lockwood series. He's a prophesied character in a sense. But these are prophecies within the fictional universe of the mainstream mediated worldview, the worldview monopoly of the power elite, the ones who write our history. I described the fake news as history telling, because the fake news which goes unchallenged becomes history. But anyway, Stallone says, we're in the presence of a mythical character. I love mythology, and this individual does not exist on this planet. Nobody in the world could have pulled off what he pulled off, so I'm in awe. Well, you're right about that. He didn't pull it off. He didn't really get shot. He is a mythical character. Like, that is a factual statement. AC, Apollo Creed says Messianic charlatan. Not bad. So I'm asking, is there a connection with this Logan Paul versus Tyson fight and Apollo Creed? Kevin Mooring, I'm glad you brought that up. I knew there was a connection here. Tupac died leaving a Tyson fight, and Trump had been at Tyson fights. Trump was a friend of Tyson in jail. Perfect circle like the supermoon tonight. So I knew there was a connection with Tupac and Tyson, and Trump and Tyson. And that now we have this article that, again, it just came out talking about how perhaps most treacherous of all is fame. Tyson got a lethal dose of a very particular American strain of it, whose victims include Elvis and Tupac and Marilyn. Messianic Charlatan says Rocky's a religious story about Jesus the Rock dethroning the pagan Apollo. Yeah, that makes sense. You know, I was looking this up today, and I found a Catholic website describing the religious aspects of it. And this is not insignificant. These are not just random aspects to the movies. Like, it's metascripting at its finest. So now you have Rocky with this Christ connection. You have the resurrection meme thrown in here that they allude to directly in the presence of Trump. So you have Trump indirectly being compared to, of course, Jesus, and then the resurrection AC thing, which is why I said Antichrist. Phil Blank says, I'm watching from X. Let's look at our numbers. Our numbers have been improving, by the way. So thanks all of you. And I do want to be more consistent. I'm trying not to divide my time as much as I have been lately on other projects. Okay, so let's see here. We've got 110 on YouTube, 7 on DLive, about 30 or so scattered throughout Odyssey, and then, of course, the audio streams are a whole separate thing. I have a different count there. On X, we've got 34. For a grand total, I would estimate close to probably almost 200 between video and audio. And if you're just listening on the audio streams, paranormal.radio, TuneIn, Radio King, RadioNet, you just go to ips.monster and you get a list of all of the live chats. Isabel Ann says, Daniel Penny incident was right before the full moon Scorpio Taurus. This fight, full moon Taurus Scorpio, definitely connected. Interesting connections. The Frugal Snowbird says, sorry, I'm late. Well, I was actually starting early because of the fight. And we're just kind of looking at the fights, you know, concurrent programming-wise, what's happening parallel narratives. And Secret Morpheus has drawn attention to the Daniel Penny, Jordan Neely death, and this fight, the death threats. You know, Tyson has to die, his mom saying she's going to kill Tyson. And then this idea of Tyson dying like Tupac or being infected with a lethal dose of fame. And then correlating this with Rocky Balboa speaking at an event where Trump is, comparing Trump to Jesus with this death resurrection theme. So what's going on here? Messianic Charlatan says, Stallone is even supposed to be an immortal clone of some religious figure. Maybe a medieval pope or something. I have not heard that. I'll look into it. I mean, he's fairly well represented in predictive programming, like, was it Judge Drito? Now, what was that one? A Demolition Man. Demolition Man had a number of aspects that were totally 2020. The quarantine cities, social distancing. There was the no contact. That was pretty big. It was like they had no toilet paper. In fact, let me pull that up. So because we're talking about Sylvester Stallone and how all these individuals are, these high-profile individuals are connected with the Metascript. And Metascript is essentially my way of describing their design for history as it will be performed and then recorded. And it is performed in the theater of Psywar. I compare it to a never-ending reality TV show. So let's look at Demolition Man and the parallels between 2020. 5 ways Demolition Man predicted life after C-19. Stallone fans are convinced Demolition Man has, quote, eerie, there's that word again, eerie parallels. Right, so in that one, people are doing elbow bumps instead of handshakes. The Demolition Man handshake comes back, yeah, it's 1993. Here's from Reddit Movies. Demolition Man 1993 has scarily accurate predictions of life in the future. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'm just pointing out that he is one of these Metascript world stage actors, and it makes perfect sense that, see these actors, when they show up at an event, they bring with them their entire body of work. Sort of like when you meet somebody, you see them at a store, you cross them somewhere, and you have their entire back catalog of associated memories that you've shared together that is included when this person shows up. You may not think about everything you went through, but it's there. And when these world stage actors come out, the various roles they have played are called to mind. And I can prove this now. After 7/13, Robert De Niro, if you remember, Robert De Niro was hanging around the Trump courthouse, and we were talking about how Robert De Niro is associated with multiple examples of predictive programming for Trump shooting, specifically in the movie Machete. Well, I went back to look at the scene in Machete that has the ear wound, the guy getting shot during a xenophobic speech. It's 100% connected. But when I went there, I noted a lot of people went to that scene immediately after the shooting. One guy had said, this was Trump's point of view 30 minutes ago. So in other words, regular people, just normies, not auto hoaxers, not media skeptics, no one calling it fake, they see the Trump event and it immediately recalls a movie they saw 14 years before. So that just shows you the power of association. And the association of planted bits of foreshadowing or predictive programming with future news events that they relate to is intentional. This is the intentional synchronization of the realm of entertainment with future news, aka fake history. So they make our history, but these events don't just happen in a vacuum. They build up to it. It's literature. I mean, they do perform our history. Osher has arrived with 5 wrenches. It's Snoopy, ABC Def, LBV Store, and Old School Days. Friendly Ghost have all received blue wrenches. And I think this is something that we should just kind of reiterate once in a while, that predictive programming is actually foreshadowing. It's a literary technique. And the literature that we're talking about, that we're describing, is the script that constitutes history. And it's the script that describes what we're going to live through in advance, and they act out various major events as simulations. A movie is a simulation. A mass casualty drill is a simulation. And the movie simulations are no different than the simulations they perform on the news. It's just a context thing. And that compartmentalization is what maintains the spell itself. Because they use the entertainment media, it's comics, it's books, it's movies, it's everything. in order to plant seeds, to put things into your frame of reference that shouldn't be there, in order to reinforce the paradigm, in order to make whatever happens next seem like a logical follow-up to what just happened before. It creates this sort of expectation. And people look at predictive programming and they notice it and they call it eerie coincidences. And truthers have notoriously taken this line, it's basically a red herring, and they've clung to it. And they're always quick to say, this is the result of dark occultists trying to absolve themselves of karmic debt for bad things they're going to do. So they have these bad explanations, and I keep calling it out. It's like, look, we can drop that. We know now that predictive programming is a form of advertising. It's a propaganda technique. It's nothing to mystify. You're not given insights into the simulation and the matrix. You're not seeing through anything on that level. It's a psychological warfare game. It's a mind game. And if you can unpack that, if you can see the worldview as separate from your lived experience, if you can separate the map from the territory, you can step out of their dream world. Like, you know, it's a dream world. The Matrix is a dream world where you are mistaking the augmentations, the superstitions, and the mere beliefs for the actual thing. And for most people, they don't run into cognitive dissonance because everything is so well reinforced. You're never going to be contradicted. If you're a true believer, the mainstream media is always going to reinforce what you believe, and they're going to attack those who promote alternative views, and they will never acknowledge those who call it fake. And this gives us a very strong advantage. We have an advantage over alt media and all of their pundits. We have this distinct advantage of being aware of the psy-war itself. It's not good enough to only know about occasional psyops and then call out the obvious ones. If you can't put them into the bigger context, then you're never going to see the truth. And we have stepped outside of their forest of fakery, and we're able to see everything accurately in its proper context. So we're not confused. And I had to raise the point about assuming nothing, assuming zero deaths on anything, mass shooting, terror attacks. If it seems to be fake, if it has a lot of coverage and it seems to be scripted, you should assume zero until proven otherwise. The burden of proof is not yours at the first indication of fakery. Okay, let's continue here. Breaking: Donald Trump is he's planning to fire U.S. attorneys prosecuting Diddy. Is Trump going to get Diddy out? Probably. It would be very on brand. I mean, really, he is the snake that he warned everyone about. Okay, so we talked about the state of the flat earth question. And just to quickly reiterate, even if a 24-hour sun is demonstrated to exist in Antarctica to the satisfaction of flat earthers, even if you at that point are unable to explain it away, and the default best explanation is that we're on a spinning ball, it does not automatically, therefore, mean space travel's real or the news is real. Quite the opposite. What it should do is it should lead all these people who are focused on debunking the ball earth to instead focusing on the real problem here, the philosophical crisis, the inversion of our psychoepistemology, where all of a sudden our perceptions are being overridden by simulations, that we no longer trust what we can perceive as much as we trust what is broadcast. That's a philosophical issue that needs to be resolved. Okay, continue. There's so much predictive programming. Trump has won 31 states, representing 312 out of 538, or 58%. This is Corporal Joe Bowers, noting how many times the number 58 has just stuck out in Trump's story. Let's see. Trump Tower, 58 stories. Mar-a-Lago, 58 bedrooms. Married Melania at 58. Donnie Darko, played in 58 theaters. It's about Trump. Tracked Down aired in 1958. And 58 years later, he was sworn in as the 58th presidential inauguration. His cameo in Quantum Leap, time travel show, set in 58. Tons of 58s in here. 58 plus 58, twins, 116. Kind of interesting. So the number is 58. There's so many with Trump, but 58's a big one with him. And I only brought it up because Tyson's 58. Again, sometimes the numbers that stand out do represent some type of concerted messaging. And Back to the Future, unlike any other movie, it is just a repository of Donald Trump / 9/11 predictive programming. And Donald Trump was consciously thought of when they designed the character Biff Tannen. So Biff Tannen is Donald Trump. I suggest that Donald Trump is about to portray his role as Hiram Abiff Tannen. Hiram Abiff is the character portrayed by the Mason who is initiated and then ritually sacrificed and they rise from the dead. This resurrection theme. While the candidate who is portraying the dead and resurrected Masonic martyr is portraying the role of Hiram Abiff. So again, Biff Tannen. And we just entered into Trump's Biff Tannen stage. That's why the left is freaking out. This fascist takeover. Lean Dion says, Screen Dreams. You know, there's a really good piece by James Shelby Downward, King Kill 33. King Kill 33 is one of the first Metascript breakdowns to any major psyop, and James Shelby Downward connected the Kennedy assassination to Apollo 11. And his contention is that these mass media dramas, these ritualistic events, are used to seize control of the dreaming mind of the masses. And by that, the dreaming mind, it refers to the subconscious. And if you think about it, your subconscious, your imagination, does seem to be the target of all the propaganda, predictive programming, so it fills up your mind with preconceived notions and imagery so that when you see something happening on the news or you read a headline, it's easy for you to imagine. When 9/11 happened, there were about 10 or 15 movies with buildings falling down, with major catastrophes that and planes crashing into buildings and terrorist attacks. The entire, I guess, entertainment landscape was just populated with all these examples of what was about to happen, which made sure that the collective psyche was saturated with the visuals. So our imaginations, our dreaming minds, were already prepped for 9/11. And at that point, you don't need to see the real thing. You just have to have the preconceived notions of what it would be like. And I noticed this kind of relationship where the entertainment can fill in the blanks. So you had the Uvalde fake shooting. And at that event, you had no visuals. It was just, we were told, oh, all these kids were killed in the classroom, and the police did nothing. But at the same time, you had Stranger Things Season 4 premiering. And at the onset of Season 4, you had this scene where the main character kills a bunch of kids. It's a real gruesome scene, a bunch of dead children. But because of the connection between that and Uvalde, Netflix put a warning, and they said on their warning label that because of recent events that have happened at this school shooting, you may want to think about not watching or turning away from the screen. It was just warning you not to look. So Netflix provided the visuals for what was not provided by the news. And it's also notable that when they show something on the news, it's either censored or they warn viewers not to look. And I say look. They did this at Thousand Oaks. They're like, don't look at the screen, it's so shocking. And I looked and there was nothing there. There's like literally nothing happening. But the entertainment can set you up with expectations, put things into the realm of possibility so that when you see it on TV, you find it very believable. Leo Pirate says, the entered apprentice to Hiram Abiff Tannen. Exactly. That is the trajectory. So you go in as an apprentice. So Trump is the apprentice. Then you move past that, into the fellowcraft, and then you get raised. So you get initiated, passed, and raised. So you could say he's already been initiated as the apprentice. I would say the part where he was passed is the intermediary step. The final step is the Hiram Abiff, the big head wound that we've been prepped for. Joined by Patricia Steer, Tominoid3. Polecat78 says, Stallone referred to Trump as a second George Washington, beside comparisons to Rocky and Jesus. Yeah, okay, that's another one, George Washington. So he's a mythical character. He's George Washington. He's Jesus. He's Rocky Balboa. And I saw something else. I saw another comparison. Let's see if I can pull this up. I think it was Cyrus. He's already been compared to Cyrus and another biblical character. So he's been Jesus. He's been King David. He hasn't become God yet. He hasn't had a full-blown apotheosis, but it's coming. He's been chosen by God. Okay, here it is. This is the one. So this is Lance Wallnau, who is a Christian nationalist. And he describes how Trump is Cyrus, but also Darius now.
Chapter 11, verse 1.
Okay.
I, Gabriel, the archangel, stood by Darius to confirm him in the first year of his administration. That meant God sent an archangel to do warfare to get the right person in office in the first 12 months. What's interesting is Cyrus is the one who's being talked about in chapter 10, and suddenly it's Darius.
Yes, there's a
in
switch.
Chapter 11. But here's what Mario Bramnick said, who was at the meeting, who works with the Trump team. He said, Donald Trump was Cyrus 45. But when he comes back in, he's no longer the 45th president. What is he going to be, the 47th president? So the 45th, 46th, 47th.
Yes.
So he's coming in as 47. 47 is going to be Darius. So he goes in as Cyrus, but he comes back as Darius.
Okay, so if that made sense to you, basically Trump served as the 45th president, during which time he was the incarnate of Cyrus, but now he's Darius the Great. Darius the Great. He was a king, reigned from 522 BCE until his death in 486. Fascinating. I mean, this is beyond a cult of personality. This is state-olatry. And this really does comport with the writings of Joseph Atwill, who talked about the use of religious iconography by the state to get believers in the various religions to actually worship Caesar as God. Why would that have changed? Trump is, for all intents and purposes, he is being worshipped. Leo Pirate says, I've been reading downwards other essays mentions the importance of nominative determinism. Location names, birthdays, the cult symbolism, very useful. Well, we often talk about, he's the one who first noted all the various psyops, the major ones that happen to be on the 33rd degree parallel. He also noted storylines like Macbeth or Wizard of Oz connected with the JFK assassination. For example, Oswald destroyed by Dorothy with the ruby slippers. Jack Ruby taking out Oswald. There's references from Macbeth, which actually was performed at the White House before the JFK assassination. But the thing he noted was what I think we've been talking about all these things for some time here, but he started it. Birthdays, names, obviously, world stage names is what we call them. But yes, he pretty much was the progenitor of all of that, although one fundamental distinction is he believed these things were real. And you can understand why someone would have concluded that at the time. But the cutting-edge media analysis recognizes the fact that all these various events that are foreshadowed are in fact fake. Angst G says, Blue Origin female employee married to an MTF trans person bludgeoned her father due to the Trump election outcome. She's 33. Yeah, that's what I said. 33-year-olds, quarantine them all. Dinosaur says false prophets like this should be destroyed. Well, in my opinion, and this is just based on my analysis of this stuff, I happen to think that mainstream media is just the latest iteration of religion, and that religion itself is just a control system where you put the group of followers into a fictional universe. And right now we're in a fictional universe. The world stage is a closed informational system. It's a worldview that serves the power elite. Every single religious holy book contains a fully complete paradigm that puts everybody in the same bubble, in the same simulation. And the priesthood control those people because they know what it's really about. And they're needed because the people can't know for themselves, so they need the priesthood to interpret it for them. So that, to me, represents the power dynamic that we see between media and the masses. The mediation, the mediators, the old mediators and the new ones. So I see no difference. And when I see prophecy in the Bible, that's just essentially old school predictive programming. Joseph Atwill made this point about backdating scriptures to make it look like the world leaders are fulfilling prophecy. So this control over history is control over time, and it's all based on the scripture, or today I call it metascripture, the metascript. I do not accept the claim that any religion is right any more than I claim that the mainstream worldview is an accurate representation of the world. I think these are all filters. And when I say all, I mean all of them. And nobody has a monopoly on truth from what I can tell religion-wise. And the monolithic nature of media today and how it's entrained with all the entertainment and how it's global, this is monotheism. It really is. Okay, Here I Am says, do you recall the magazine cover from way back with Trump in the mirror as king? Oh, yes. That was in 2020. Leo Pirate says, 3 witches from Macbeth and the 3 hobos. Fair is foul and foul is fair. I didn't like the new Macbeth so much. I think that was with... it was all shot in black and white. And it was... the tragedy of Macbeth. But I watched it because there seemed to be some significance to it. Denzel Washington. I mean, I watched it because at the time I was taking up charcoals and I thought it would just be good visuals, which it was. But it wasn't the best representation of Macbeth that I've ever seen. But I think it's notable that Macbeth was part of the subtext of the JFK assassination, and it was performed at the White House just before he died. And we often talk about the world stage, and that's a phrase from Shakespeare. Okay, continuing here. Truman B3000 says, Polybius believed that while considered superstition by other people, the widespread practice of religion in Rome. Yeah, go on. Yes, he had said that superstition maintained the cohesion of the Roman state. Superstition maintaining the cohesion of the Roman state. It's like pointing out how after 9/11, and many people talked about this, after 9/11, people felt unified. Everybody felt connected. There was a sense of unity of purpose, and we're all the same. I often hear people, especially on Fox, pining for those days. Like, oh, sometimes I wish we could go back to those days after 9/11 when everybody was unified. It's like we were all traumatized. But my point of it is, you have a superstition, you have a psyop, you have a hoaxed event, and it unified everybody. It brought everyone together. Even as it divided people, it brought us together in the same game. So even though you have two antagonized sides that are just diametrically opposed, left versus right, Bush did it, inside job versus don't tolerate conspiracy theories and support the war. These two opposing views, the split, is unified in the fact that they're playing the same game. And that's the purpose to the psyops, and it always has been. That's the purpose to religion. Religion has always been mind control, and mainstream media is just the most sophisticated version of this mind control system. And I put out this book called Secret Religion of the Elite, and a video called Cult of the Obelisk. And my contention is that their worldview, it's not really about spirituality, but their religion is about worldview. And it's about establishing a view, a version of events that disempowers the ignorant, like keeping them illiterate. Illiteracy has, for a long time, been a factor in the knowledge disparity, the power disparity. And right now, I think it's even worse, because now we have all been, it doesn't matter how literate you are, we have all been rendered visually illiterate. And so long as you accept the screen at face value, then you are susceptible to visual lies that can't be readily debunked. Like I mentioned before, I get fooled. You know, I saw this giant clownfish, like as big as a whale, being dragged onto a boat, and I thought it was amazing. And then I watched The Penguin with Colin Farrell, and I didn't know it was Colin Farrell. I just thought they found this character actor who looks just perfect for the job. I didn't know it was a mask. I didn't know the clownfish was AI. So I got lied to twice. I basically lied to myself. I was deceived. That visual illiteracy typifies the news consumer of the day, and it's all by design, of course. And this knowledge disparity created by the visual literacy is what makes the programmers so, I think, powerful, because they create reality. They really do. If they focus on it, it's real. If they don't, it's not real. And the burden of proof has been accepted by the people who are living noses pressed up against the screen. And since they can't prove stuff fake, they say, well, I wasn't there, so I guess it might be real. Which is weak. It's weak. You can't say, I wasn't there at 9/11, so I can't say nobody died. That's weak. You can take a position here. If you can debunk any aspect of it, and I would say the fact that there were 88 drills being performed that day, 88 mass casualty simulations, more than 1,000 people involved, all the predictive programming, that alone is indication of a hoax. So the death toll should be 0. Leo Pirate says, it begs the question, why are the legitimate prophecies of the Bible drowned out by state-promoted religion, using those as decoration? Yeah, I have many examples. I often talk about how climate change is just a reiteration of the flood myth. It's because they're taking the old controlling paradigm, the old model, and dressing it up with science fiction. They took the obelisk, symbol of the earth god, and they replaced it with a rocket, new symbol of the earth god. They even use the same names. And you look at all the rockets. I mean, they make fun of Jeff Bezos because it looks like Dr. Evil's dong rocket. Yeah, that's by design. It represents the severed phallus of Osiris. That is literally what it is. And every other aspect of our modern worldview, as we examine like the big picture, it's pretty much templated off of something older. Space is the new heaven. So my contention is that the old myths are old fake news. And right now, they're rebranding everything. So you got aliens. Aliens are angels that atheists will believe in. Atheists will never believe in angels, but they believe in aliens. Atheists would never believe that our wickedness would cause a god to flood the world. But they certainly believe that you not recycling and driving an SUV is going to lead to Gaia raising the oceans and flooding the world. And there are countless examples of this perfect template. Same controllers. The New World Order is the old world order, just dressing itself back up. And if you believe the news literally, if you're an auto believer, you live in a simulation. If you believe the holy books literally, and you're an auto believer, you live in a simulation. And if you live in one of these simulations, and you shouldn't be offended by this, because I say if you have a biblical worldview, you live in that sim. That's your mental construct. If you believe in the Quran, that's your construct. If you believe in Dianetics, that's your construct. But none of these are better than any of the others. They're all equal. If you live in box A, you can't call out box B as being fake or box C as being fake, because you're all in the same big box. You're all subsets, equally false. Arguing on behalf of religious scripture is the exact same thing as arguing on behalf of what's presented on the screen. That's why I say the flat versus round debate has always been flawed, because it goes from old holy books, old media to new media, and which do you prefer? Which one is going to be your source for your cosmology? How about neither? Matt Armitage says space is fluid. All I know about space is that it's up. Now, if the 24-hour sun is demonstrated to exist, then space would therefore be all around us. But it's an important question, because if there is no curve, if this is not a ball, then there is no surrounding space. There's no reason to assume that we're on a discrete object floating somewhere. And I kind of hope it is. Like I'd like to have that conversation. Like, hey, look, it's a ball. Yeah, but NASA still lies. SpaceX is still fake. The news is still fake. Our cosmology is still given to us through the liars who use special effects. So our work is only just beginning. And I'd like all these people who've been hung up on this ridiculous debate over flat versus round to really focus on the closed system and breaking that open. The ice wall is not a thing, but mentally there is one. There are constraints on our worldview built up of or out of false explanations. Armin Ree, I agree with you. He says, I agree with you on that, Tim. Literalized symbolic stories are pre-programming scripts used as foundation for hoaxes. Look, I definitely say I respect believers. A lot of my friends believe all the news. I know people who believe in religious stuff. And I'm just saying, good for you. You believe it. But you have to admit, just to be honest and to not be a liar to yourselves, you have to admit, I only believe these things. I don't know them to be true. And if somebody says, I know it's true because I saw it on TV, you can just dismiss them. If someone says, I know it's true because I read it in my holy book, you're on the same base. You're on the same foundation of essentially faith and trust, secondhand info. It's not direct perception. And ultimately, we're talking about a war on perception. Who perceives for you? How much of your perception do you outsource? But I'm in no way trying to disabuse people of their belief. I will never try to convince somebody not to watch CNN or Fox or even to listen to Infowars. If you're a truther and you're scared of 5G towers and Bill Gates and cirrus clouds, good for you. I mean, that's your ascetic, paranoid worldview, not mine. I'm not trying to stop believers from believing. What I'm trying to do here is segregate a group of knowers and non-believers, informed non-believers, who know why we reject belief. I mean, if you have a choice, you do have a choice. You have a choice between a wide array of belief systems and prefabricated models, or you can reject models until you have more information and have, instead of a belief system, an operating system rooted in skepticism. Automatically believing your sourcing, the information from your sources, just automatically giving it a pass because you trust them, is a blind spot. It's a vulnerability, and there's no reason for it. We're in the age of information. Leo says, I test the claims in my holy books instead of accepting religion. No, I believe that you believe that. I believe that most people in the world believe in the moon landings. Most people in the world believe in 9/11. I believe that you believe that, but I reject beliefs in favor of direct knowledge and information. So, again, you can't say that you know it to be true if it's merely anecdotal and it's purely subjective and you have no evidence for it. And that's fine, because what we're doing is an objective analysis of mainstream media, and our objective analysis is based on this. Really, it's a rejection of all claims that are attended by facts, but categorizing them as simulations or faked events or hoaxes. So we're not denying reality. We're just denying the interpretations. Like, I agree 9/11 happened. I just don't believe the version of it that the mainstream promulgates. But I never really wanted to get into debating people on their religions, and I hadn't even given a single thought to religion for years. I actually abandoned the pursuit in favor of what I consider to be spirituality, and I'm very interested in that topic. I'm interested in spirituality. The problem with religions is religions are always bigoted and prejudiced against other religions, and so they put these barriers to discourse, or they just hand-wave dismiss whatever is not in their book. And so it's this, ethnocentrism built into every religious paradigm that I reject. Same thing with people who are mainstream media fundamentalists. Mainstream media fundamentalists who argue from their pundits or their partisan media. All you're doing is you're just spreading propaganda. Untested information, or even untestifiable. You can't even test it. Untestable. But I don't think the people who write these big scripts care about faithfulness to original texts. They just borrow. It's a Frankenstein. Our modern paradigm is a mashup. It's an amalgamation. It's a one-size-fits-all religion. I mean, think about it. Even the atheists believe in the modern construct that replaces heaven. Yes, Matt Armitage, that's my take on it. Spirituality has more knowledge than dogma religion. You can acquire all sorts of religious beliefs, but it's not the same thing as spiritual experiences. And by spiritual experiences, I mean things that are, I guess, that you would consider to be indications of our human experience being beyond just that of over-evolved apes with big egos trying to make sense of things from a very limited perspective, but rather that there's something more to us, that we may even in fact be a higher sort of being descended into a lower ordered being, and our purpose here is to not lose sight of that. But I do think that there's a lot to talk about in that realm of spirituality, which has been hijacked by religion. And I've never found that the claims of religion to be all that interesting or impressive anyway. I think synchronicity is intriguing. It has some significant implications for the model of the universe, for what this place is. If we do live in a cybernetic system, but the instant you try to plug it into a religion and dogma, it becomes a drag, because now it's just about universally accepting a consensus, and then also, I think, almost, I guess, prostrating oneself before an egregore. The individual's perception doesn't weigh as much as the collective's certainty, and their certainty comes secondhand. I mean, I find the same issues. Like, I really would say that media is religion. I confront the same types of mentalities whenever I have tried to talk to people who are in the MSM box about these various aspects to it that make it questionable. It's like, no, if you accept a belief system, nothing will challenge it. But I'm not interested in talking about, or rather debunking, the old religions, because they're self-discrediting. But I'm interested in the one right now. I'm interested in the present day mainstream media, which has become the world state church. And I call it nasotology, and its doctrines are scientism. I mean, I'm not anti-science by any stretch, but there's a point where we have outsourced so much of our perceptions that there are some areas where what we think is being performed by scientists is actually being performed by special effects departments. You can trust science up until about the Carmen line, I think. Armin Reese says, JL didn't predict a real Trump ear wound, only hoax ones. This means he wasn't reading real prophecy, but pre-programmed fakery. Exactly. That's kind of where we diverge. He and I have different views. He's a biblical believer, and I'm not. And I do understand, rather I try to empathize. I want to know what someone's box is. So when I communicate to them, I know where they're coming from, and I understand why they assert the things they do. But we're in a different place. So the idea that the predictive programming is going to foreshadow real events, that's been debunked. It's always fakery. And there's no reason why predictive programming foreshadowing in the news would be foreshadowing fakery if it wasn't done by the same individuals and agencies that fake the news. Like God isn't going to intervene and inspire some film director to foreshadow something that's fake. That's the trouble with synchromysticism. They treat media as divinely inspired, or they're willing to suspend disbelief. They're willing to suggest that, well, maybe there's a higher power at work because this is too baffling. These things are too interconnected. Man couldn't do this. It's like, no, you're underestimating man. And I cite Arthur C. Clarke's law of, I think it's the second one. I need to watch Childhood's End. I think it's on HBO. So Clarke's 3 laws, the 3 adages known as Clarke's 3 laws. And the one that I'm referring to is any sufficiently developed technology is indistinguishable from magic. So that doesn't mean it's magic. It means it's so sophisticated, it looks like magic to those who are ignorant of how it works. So we can't figure out how these news stories are consistently preceded by and attended real time by things happening in entertainment. These are eerie coincidences. Are they? No, they're predictable coincidences. It looks like magic because media is so advanced, but it's not magic. You can actually debunk it. And these aren't miracles. These aren't eerie coincidences. These aren't synchronicities. It is, in fact, the deliberate entrainment of entertainment with future fake news, as I've described before. Because fake news is history. Our conquerors write history, and we have been conquered. And as Sun Tzu wrote in The Art of War, the supreme art of war is to defeat your enemy without drawing your sword. I mean, we have been conquered mentally. Thank you, Ted Stryker. 10 blue wrenches. Gem 7 Angel. Just give me 5 minutes, please. Diana Southard. Geo Ptolemy. I am Ion's Cat. Princess Buttercup. Isabel Ann. Hallabilly Homestead. And Angst G have all received the blue wrench. Psyops matter as well. Yes, abuse the power responsibly. Ban trolls. Lucid Stream says we could literally be inside of a computer game type of thing. Some type of program in our central nervous system is our operating systems. Definitely not out of the realm of possibilities. Fascinating. I've heard this before, and it is an interesting idea. At that point, you know, it's like the computer at the center of the universe in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. You know, the number 42, it was the answer to everything given by this supposed computer. Musk used to often talk about this, like, well, we're in a simulation. And I think it's interesting speculation. My own personal take on things is that the universe doesn't exist until it's experienced. But as far as the breakdown of the news goes, I use the word simulation to describe the mental map of the world. And it's subtle. And this is why people confuse it for the real thing. But imagine if you lived with a liar, and this person is a pathological liar, and they are your only connection to the world. They have a lot of power now, a lot of creative control over your experience. In fact, there's a good movie on this called Room, where this teenager's kidnapped and kept in a shed, and she has a child. And for 5 years, she thinks that the shed is the entire world. And so your world can be constrained. It can be limited. It can be manipulated if you only have one source. And for all intents and purposes, mass media is one source. Media is so monolithic that even though you have it seemingly fragmented and there's millions of different pundits and all kinds of platforms and positions, ultimately they fall under the big script. It is monolithic. But the simulation that we live in is what I'm calling out here. And I think simulation theorists often become so because they notice anomalies and they think, well, if the news is eerie, then reality must be eerie. And that's the mistake they want you to make. Like Joe Rogan will go there. He'll say, well, this stuff with Trump happening, it's so crazy. We got to be in a simulation. Now, that's going too far. No, we're in a mental simulation, or they're lying. The event was fake. But it doesn't mean that the world that we walk upon is fake. And that's the object of the Psywar. I think they want you to exit the world. They want you to be out of the meatverse and into the metaverse. Your living room is your matrix pod. And they'll do so through fear, through entertainment. They'll find different ways to make you into a metaverse dominant, like you're now a metaverser. They want you to be metaverse dominant instead of meatverse dominant. They don't want you walking around because environmentalism. They don't want you spreading your carbon footprint, but they want you to exist solely online. And the more online you are, the more susceptible you are to their psyops. The more they can become the sole source of your interpretation, the more they control your entire reality. And they put you into a sim. But you wouldn't know it's a sim if you never leave your house to test it. Think about empty hospitals. A lot of people thought the hospitals are so full, so packed, that the bodies were falling out of the top windows. We called these the 311 jumpers. Oh, everything's so full. All the ICUs are packed. The morgues are full and the bodies are everywhere. Then we started driving around with our press passes and just fact checking it, testing their claims. And everywhere people looked, they found nothing but empty hospitals. And all the videos coming from the hospitals were dancing, twerking nurses. That's it. So what's going on here? There's some kind of a discrepancy between the televised version and the real thing. So if you live as though the televised version is the real thing, you're in their simulation. You're not supposed to know it's a simulation. And we know it's a sim. We're outside of it. Messianic Charlatan says Rome was pronounced room by Jacobite era Scots. I'm glad you said that, because when I watched Room, the movie, I thought that it referenced Rome. I thought it was a reference to empire and monolithic worldviews. So here's the poster for Room. Really twisted movie. And when she tells him, when he turns 5, that she's going to help him escape the room, he doesn't believe her. He calls her a liar. He says to his mom, "You're lying. There's nothing outside of room." And she said, "I lied to you to keep you alive, but now I am unlying," which is a cool word, unlying. So she had to undo the brainwashing so he would accept that there was a world outside of the room. Like a little Truman Show. And we do live in a collective Truman Show. And while Truman was in the Truman Show, he was living in a simulation. It's physically real. He's breathing air. He's having a totally real experience, but his mental construct is the sim. And that's really what I mean. And the simulation theorists seem to not notice that the news is fake, or they don't notice the level to which it's faked. So simulation theory is almost a red herring to distract from the simulation, the real simulation. Charlie Dunn says, right-wingers are saying another pandemic will be unleashed under Trump to destroy him. Could be. I think it's going to be Disease X. He's going to be blamed. I mean, look, the guy who's being pointed at now, Nick Fuentes, patient zero for this mind virus that just broke out of toxic misogyny or something. He had dinner with Donald Trump. And again, this guy is not inconsequential. He's not insignificant. He's the one who started. Essentially, he popularized replacement theory, where he would chant, "Jews will not replace us." And that was years ago. That's actually how he got his start. Okay, let's see here. A couple hours away from the fight. I think maybe another hour or so. So we talked about Sunita in space, losing weight. They're still stranded. FBI says that racist text messages were sent to black communities around the country, and they're in contact with the Justice Department on the matter. text message. These are all offensive text messages. And apparently, the FBI is on top of it. So this is just more kind of correlating with this disease X, which is breaking loose. Mike Tyson slaps Jake Paul. It's on Netflix, so it has to be real. Can't wait. And I am going to watch it and review it. And just so you know, if something happens, if something psyop-y happens, we're going to be watching it. We're going to be watching this event. And as Synchromorpheus pointed out, there are some connections here. As he said, the jurors in the Penny trial are debating whether Neely's accidental death was unfortunate given his threats to passengers in the subway. Will the fight end equally bad for Tyson? Tyson's mental health issues have also been a focal point, just like with Neely. This is getting interesting. Again, Synchromorpheus, if you don't follow him on Twitter, and I put a link there, he has quite a lot to say about this Daniel Penny event. And Daniel Penny, weirdly enough, his profile looks like Lincoln on the penny. Ted Stryker says, a post I read online says Netflix is crashing because millions are signing in. Don at South says, Sunita's hair falling out, floating all over the place like cat hair. Okay, let's see what else we have. I'm going through my Twitter account. If you follow me on Twitter, I've been posting a lot of my blog posts there. And one of them I posted recently is Assume Nothing, examining the bloody guardrails. So if somebody pushes back against you, making a statement that nobody died, confidently, because there are people pushing back on it, I would suggest reading this, sharing this. You can confidently assert, and this is just based on the burden of proof, that nobody died, nobody cried at fill in the blank. And if somebody knows different, just demand evidence. If the mainstream can't provide evidence that anybody died at fill in the blank event, then how are you going to do it? Those of you who want to be media advocates and want to say, well, maybe somebody died. Well, then which somebody? Because we have a list, we have names, find out which one and prove it. But there's no reason to dwell in the fog of Psywar, uncertainty, and confusion. I'm not confused. Truthers are generally the most confused people on earth. And what you can say is, I know it's fake, but I don't know the specifics of how this particular illusion was created. This is especially important with the space stuff. The globers will say, the gloobers, they'll say, well, how did they fake it? It couldn't be wires. Look at how he did this flip. I'm like, I don't know. But because I don't know how it was perfect, I can't explain it perfectly. Doesn't mean it's real. In fact, the more we research, the more we find how these various things are actually performed. If you want to know how they simulate zero-G, look at the back or the behind the scenes on that movie by Christopher Nolan, Inception, where they have the rotating set. So again, you can say, I know it's fake, but I don't know the specifics of how this particular illusion was created. And I often use the analogy of a magic show. If you can only figure out how he did 9 magic tricks, doesn't mean you have to credit the magician with having done real magic on the 10th. You have to say, I don't know. I need more information. Kevin Mooring says Netflix is a propaganda machine. Well, Netflix is almost required viewing for auto hoaxers. If you're going to be examining world stage psyops, you need to know what kind of preparation is going into it in the form of foreshadowing and pre-programming. And Netflix is, I think, probably the most psyop rich environment. I mean, everything there is psyop entertainment. You've got concurrent programming. It's certainly well timed. I mean, this is one of the main things that debunks the synchromistic premise, that these are coincidences in advance. Well, no, sometimes it's real time. You know, Trump kicks off his campaign in Waco, and then Waco, American Apocalypse, comes out on Netflix at the same time, with messaging attaching itself to Trump in an ominous way. No, this is all theater. And of course, the first CEO and co-founder of Netflix was related to Edward Bernays and Sigmund Freud. So Bernays, you get father of public relations and perception management stunts, changing human behavior at scale. They figured this out a long time ago. Like self-surveillance is something that they programmed into us. Social media, posting all your stuff online, like Facebook is a mind-reading device, and everything being published. This is all by design. And essentially, you combine the two, and it makes perfect sense. You've got total mind control. Behavior modification combined with the knowledge of Sigmund Freud, it kind of ties in the subconscious, the manipulation. And a lot of the stuff is playing upon our psychological needs and fears and insecurities. Like I think last week we were talking about guns and wombs. Gun control and then womb control, and why these are so antagonistic. Like you talk about these things, it's inflammatory. They're going to take our guns. It introduces paranoia. But that narrative, that propaganda line targets right-wingers and those who subscribe to what the left would call toxic masculinity. So the gun is an obvious symbol. And the feminists want to take your guns. Yeah, they want to castrate you. They want to make you into a Ken doll. And then the feminists are like, oh, they're going to regulate our wombs. Abortion. So they're the men who represent on the right, toxic masculinity, the MAGA ban, want to control women's bodies. So now you have this basically attacks at a very deep level on each of them on the basis of sex. So the male-female divide, the racial divides, these are all things that they play off of, but it's all very subconscious, targeting deep insecurities. Xenophobia is huge. It's probably what really gets Trump all the support, but you can see how what they have done, all the propagandists who push xenophobia have turned into this alien thing, and they've turned aliens into the bad guys. Tucker Carlson was attacked by an alien in his bed. It left scars that never stop bleeding, but he'll never show you, but he has them. And this is not unintentional. Fear of the other, fear of aliens, demonizing aliens, and it's all like full spectrum propaganda. They target your subconscious, your conscious mind. So you have a rational fear, irrational fears, all mixed up. Charlie Dunn says, how do you have the attention span to sit through the trash on Netflix? Good question. I do so, like I go to movies. I went to Barbie. I go to these movies with a notebook and I take notes. I actually study these movies as like opposition research or as an anthropologist. So for me, it's just a continuation of film studies, which I was a major in before I left that school. I was actually really focused on Kubrick's work at the time. And I really was into editing. And so for me, it's not even work. And I'm happy to watch bad movies on your behalf. So I want to say thanks again to the supporters of this channel, because you're basically enabling me to consume a lot of garbage media on your behalf. Lucid Stream says, suggestion, subliminal messaging. Yes. Priming us. They're priming us. Inserting things into the realm of possibility that don't exist, but they've so saturated your mind it may exist. And then you have the misinformation effect, where your recall of past news events is going to be influenced by similar events that you've seen in entertainment media. Like all these memories that are associated go in the same filing cabinet in your mind. And the misinformation effect is well documented. It's well understood. In fact, if you want to know what causes the Mandela effect, it is essentially a weaponized form of the misinformation effect. So the misinformation effect is a real thing. And it's essentially about our recall and how what you remember is always affected by whatever you're looking at. Whenever you recall it, each time, you're tainting that memory in a sense. So the misinformation effect occurs when a person's recall becomes less accurate because of post-event information. So if you think about it, somebody might have what they call a root memory of something will say they remember Fruit of the Loom had a cornucopia on their underwear tag. And they have a memory that they say, this is my anchor memory, is their term. This is my anchor memory. I remember this, and it used to have a cornucopia, and now it doesn't. So then you bring up the Mandela effect, and they talk about it, and they show you many examples of this logo. And sometimes, in every one of these events, actually now, these Mandela effects are presented, modified in Photoshop to show you what it used to look like. So you're looking at these fake versions asserted to be what it used to be. And these images that you're taking in of the fake versions can actually affect your recollection of the original. It can replace it, in fact. Good call there. Diana South, Tyson, Tyree, Tyreek, Tyrone. Yep, they cloned Tyrone. Trey, like Trayvon Martin, and then, of course, Tyreek Hill. And the Tyreek Hill event, the Miami football player who was taken out of his car by the police very roughly, that happened right as Netflix released Rebel Ridge, where the same exact thing happened. And the actor in Rebel Ridge was going to be in They Cloned Tyrone. But the name Tyrone, again, is it Tyree Nichols? Tyreek Hill? It all contains Tyre, T-Y-R-E, or Tyre. And this is all related to the Masonic ritual, and the names are all a tie into the same exact martyrdom. In fact, Trey, like Trayvon Martin, T-R-E-Y, and martyr. So it's all about this martyrdom thing. But the name Tyson does fit into that. Lean Dion says, the intro scenes and music to shows have much symbolic priming. The Pox Bottle says, Tim, in your time studying thus far, have you found which faction is writing and is in control of the Metascript? No. But I can say that the Metascriptors throw out red herrings so that anybody trying to figure out who's in control will spend their entire lives chasing a scapegoat that is intentionally planted there to lead you to wrong conclusions. So if you think you know who controls the world and you base your worldview off of that, then it's going to have built into it a lot of assumptions that contradict the reality. So for example, the people who think that this certain group controls the world, a certain ethnic group, well, they think 9/11 was real. They think that every PSYOP is real. They think that this group is orchestrating immigration to replace them. So there's all these other beliefs attached to these scapegoat narratives. And I reject those. I reject the critical race theory on the left and the critical Jew theory on the right. These are intentional red herrings so that people think they know who's running the show, but nobody knows. I can just describe the system. It's not a whodunit, it's a what is it. And we have to figure out what it is first. The people who think they know who's behind it all don't know what it is. Jessica Roberts, thank you, says, oh, it's Yurt Mama from TN. Thank you for joining. Now, Terry Nichols, that event has some significance here we could get into. Quite a lot, in fact. Terry Nichols, his death scene was templated off of the death of Rodney King. In fact, let me bring this up really quick because somebody mentioned Scorpio, Isabel N. I believe Terry Nichols wasn't even killed by real cops, but it was these like undercover cops, and I think they were called the Scorpions. Yeah, the Scorpion unit killed Tyree Nichols. I keep saying Terry. And by the way, the main character in Rebel Ridge, who is going to be, but wasn't, in They Killed Tyrone, he played a character named Terry, another Tyree anagram. So the Scorpion unit beat down Tyree Nichols. Now, the connections to this, and there's quite a lot. We could really go all night on this particular one. But the nickel is a significant thing in Jordan Peele's movie Nope. If you've watched Nope, this character dies when a nickel falls out of the UFO and lands in his eye. And the significance to that is Nope is a movie about a UFO, but It's actually inspired by, according to Jordan Peele, the death of George Floyd and how that video footage became a mind virus that set off waves of protests, riots, violence. So it's about the spectacle. Rodney King, the Rodney King beating, was the spectacle that created the LA riots. And by the way, the Rodney King beating was filmed on the same camera in the hands of George Holliday, who was actually filming Terminator 2, about an evil cop. So Terminator 2, James Cameron, really the first time that a cop becomes the antagonist and the villain. So this evil cop movie, this guy's filming it, walking around Los Angeles, and then he sees the beating of Rodney King. 1 minute, 19 seconds, he was hit 33 times, and he recorded it, and that video then set off the riots. So there's a couple of other connections as well, but the nickel thing is this connection, again, to the Nope by Jordan Peele. Furthermore, Martin Luther King Jr.'s daughter was at the protest for Tyre Nichols, and they shut down I-55. And this was during the 55th year since MLK was assassinated. On MLK's assassination anniversary, 4/4/2023, Donald Trump was in jail that day, and they were, trying to make him into a martyr. So the martyr theme is huge here. Trump as a martyr on 4/4 Holy Week. They compared him to Christ. They compared him to Moses, that he wasn't going to see the promised land of MAGA. And by the way, Moses was also kind of inferred with MLK's final speech about the promised land before he was killed on 4/4. I mean, it's so deep. I mean, we talk about this all the time, but all of these martyr psyops and these BLM, Black Lives Matter psyops, are all contained in the same fictional universe. My Third Eye says, I watched a vid where Trump tried to show his ear scar to Joe Rogan, and neither Rogan nor the pro-Trump YouTuber pointed out that you couldn't see anything on the video. YouTuber just believed without seeing. Yeah, he said he saw a small mark, but they moved on and they talked about wrestling of all things. Okay, let's continue. Kevin Mooring says, Trump's earshot was so fake it looked real. Oh, yes. It looked so fake, so it must have been real. Elon Musk. It's an Elon Muskism. Ooh, interesting, Diana South. Tyson is a destroyer of ears. You know what? There's a dispensary here, and I can go buy gummies that are shaped like Evander Holyfield's ear by Tyson. Tyson has his own line of gummies and marijuana, but marijuana blunts and stuff. But yeah, I can go buy little gummy ears. So that's another connection. We got Rocky talking about Trump's resurrection and the Christ thing. Right now we have the fight. Tyson's in the story. Tyson, Tupac, Trump. We talked about their connections. And now we have the ear thing. So, good connection there. Is Trump at the fight? Good question. Now, the scorpion thing. I brought up Tyre Nichols because we're talking about Tyson and how his name fits in this general trend. And we're talking about this because of the sign. I think that was Isabel Ann talked about Scorpio. But yeah, the scorpion unit kills him. Now, this is also kind of interesting because according to, I heard this from Micah Dank, who has a series of books exposing the astrotheological basis for Christianity. And he suggested that November 22nd is the date of the Kennedy assassination. And it has to do with Sagittarius, entering Sagittarius. But the story is the sun god is stung by the scorpion. And if you look at from Scorpio till the end of the year, the sun, quote, dies. And then he said 11/22, Sagittarius, the archer. And that day is Oswald, shooting from the grassy knoll and taking out Kennedy, the Sun King. And King Kill 33 is all about Kennedy being the Sun King. Diana South says, the media covered Mike Tyson before and after he took a bite out of Evander Holyfield's ear. Well, it's a Mandela effect. You see, this is another example of the misinformation effect. Anybody who watched the fight may have seen their proximity, and you can see what looked to be the bite, but the Mandela effect claim that they remember that Mike Tyson had a chunk of the ear that he spit out. They remember Holyfield having his ear like cut in half. So they all claim they remember this stuff. But if you look back at the original footage, it wasn't really like that. It's largely an exaggeration. The Pox Bottle says, Tim Osmond, obviously the globe is dead, but do you reckon mainstream flat earth is a psyop hiding a toroidal level plane? Whatever the truth is behind this thing, the flat earth model is a psyop. It is a psychological operation. The model first approach was never authentic. The flat earth society always started with a model. And the problem with this is that the model isn't backed with information, and nobody's trying to test it. And it presumes too much. The flat earth society has the model of the disk with the dome on it, and it's flying up 32 feet per second. And they purposefully make a joke out of themselves. It's not a serious question. And I would argue that the flat earth model is fallacious and premature. However, the flat earth question is valid. Like, how do you know it's not? How do you know it is what they say it is? And when you examine that question, you arrive at, well, I kind of don't, because they've given me a lot of crappy special effects. But if we can prove it in other ways, then we're left with an answer as far as what it is, but that still doesn't explain why the images we have been shown are all fake. Mike bit the lobe. Let me take a look. Like, was there really a chunk? Was there a visible chunk taken out of Evander Holyfield's ear? Let's take a quick look here. When Mike Tyson bit the ear, he bit it twice. So he bit the ear, and here we go. Okay, that's what Trump's ear should have looked like. That's pretty big. That's like one of those. That is a pretty big chunk. Okay. But when people say "I remember," and this is why I think the Mandela effect was such a useful conspiracy theory to debunk. Oftentimes people will say "I remember," like I am a source on this, and that phrase "I remember" needs to be challenged all the time. Some people will say, "I remember people jumping off the building on 9/11." Do you? Because that footage wasn't shown until the next day. I used to get that a lot with people claiming to have seen the space station. I remember I saw the space station and it went from horizon to horizon. That didn't happen. Lucid Stream says Earth may be a lobe. Yeah, well, looks like you're right. They bit his lobe, as Trump would describe it. He touches the top of his ear. He's like, yeah, they shot my lobe. Now, the ear thing, another point about it is that the ear thing has some significance to 9/11 as well. I think there's a deeper level to this. So Doug Mills is the one who photographed the bullet whizzing by Trump's ear. And he also photographed George Bush on 9/11 as he's whispering 9/11 into his ear. So what's up with that? The bullet's whizzing by Trump's head with 4745, which adds to 9/11. So there's some deeper significance to the ear, and we have many examples. I have this list here of my top 11 favorite examples of Trump head wound predictive programming, but we have found others with more specificity since this that specify the ear. Tony Soprano drinking orange juice, Trump Orange Man, and season 1 finale, he gets shot in the ear. Failed assassination attempt. And that connects a lot of things. It connects to The Godfather, all this orange symbolism attending those assassinations. And then, of course, Francis Ford Coppola having the Trump character getting shot and resurrecting in Megalopolis. Then you have Batman Caped Crusader, which is on Amazon right now. They renewed it for season 2 on 8/4, which is significant. But more significant. The season 1 finale ends where Donald Trump's character in that show, his name is Rupert Thorne, which may connect to DT Damian Thorne, another Trump proxy. All these predictive programming representatives of world stage characters and politicians, I call them predictive programming proxies. So Rupert Thorne represents Trump in the Batman universe in this Caped Crusader series. And at the end of the series, Batman throws his boomerang and it cuts the right ear of Rupert Thorne exactly where Trump's ear was cut. And this came out this summer, around the same time. And the season ends with, we'll finish this next season. So I'm thinking this means that there's going to be another similar event during this next term. Lean Dion says, Mandela effect ties into simulation theory. Surprised Elon doesn't push it. Yeah, really. And that's another thing too. It says the news is fake because we live in a simulation and everything changes. It's like, no, the news is fake because it's a simulation and it's not a perfect reflection. It's not a perfect map. But if you can get yourself to believe in Mandela effects, then the question of fake news is secondary because now reality is fake. That you're on the wrong side of the screen. That's what I call the inversion. That's the inversion. Your how you process information. You know, your psychoepistemology has been inverted if you're accepting at face value everything on the screen. My third eye says, Tyson fights in the 80s were great entertainment. They might have been rigged, but they were fun to watch. His opponents looked like they were scared. Yeah, on the question of rigging, I don't know. I can understand taking a fall, but some of these things, the question is fakeable. Is it fakeable? And at what scale? But we're dealing with actors, that's true. But as a rule, fake until proven real. And in this particular instance, I think there's enough predictive programming and narrative buildup that if Tyson literally dies, it's likely a hoax. Now, what would be the purpose to it? I don't know, but the connection with the Daniel Penny thing, very interesting. The Trump-Tupac links, very pertinent and intriguing. And then we have this theme here from Rocky that has been brought up, where it's at Resurrection AC, and then Trump being connected with Rocky. There's too much here for it to be trusted if anything goes down whatsoever. Again, here, Tyson got a lethal dose of fame, the American strain of it, whose victims include Elvis and Tupac and Marilyn Monroe. And then here you have the creepy situation of Jake Paul's mom offering to kill Mike Tyson. And he's like, Mike Tyson must die. And I guess we can add on to it, it's a full moon. So, great night for a psyop. There's a lot more to talk about. I just wanted to get through the last few days. Again, I've been making it a point to list our topics on the Insider blog. So we talked about Infowars being overturned, maybe. Netflix fight tonight, Jake Paul and Tyson. Now, if it's real, it'll be the first time that Netflix has ever presented something that wasn't a psyop. Disease X has been released, male supremacy, right-wing violence, right-wing rage. Synchromorpheus noted that, yes, the whole thing had been postponed, and they likely postponed it so that it would coincide with the jury deliberating on the fate of Daniel Penny. And so the story on Daniel Penny and how it relates to it is that Jordan Neely is on the subway and he's getting violent and he's mentally ill. So Daniel Penny, being a trained Marine, puts him in a chokehold. He chokes him for 10 minutes or something. I'm surprised they didn't make it 8:46. And then he dies. So the question is, was this intentional? Was it an accident? But it's highly partisan. Daniel Penny is a hero to the right wing because for a year prior, right-wing influencers were nonstop sharing videos of violence on subways. Marjorie Taylor Greene said, it's like Gotham. We need some Batmans. We need some vigilantes. So they saw him as a hero. Interestingly, all these pundits on the right who were saying, get out of the cities because of the subways, they kept saying, get out, get out. Well, Jordan Peele, and I mentioned him again, he directed a movie called Get Out, which contains copious predictive programming for Daniel Penny. And then finally, this guy, so not only is he a right-wing hero, but, Kid Rock, I believe, gave him like $1 million. Top donor, Kid Rock. So his legal defense fund is, I think it's way more than $2 million. There's quite a lot here, but he has the biggest Give, Send, Go campaign of all time. Give, Send, Go is like the GoFundMe or GoFraudMe for the right wing. Left wingers use GoFundMe. Right wing heroes get and martyrs, they get Give, Send, Go. So he's a pretty big deal. Raised a ton of money because people believe that he was doing a public service and that it was an accident. So that's the question. Same thing with Derek Chauvin. Derek Chauvin, did he kill George Floyd or was it an overdose? The right wing says, no, George Floyd overdosed on fentanyl. The left said, no, he was asphyxiated by systemic racism. So which is it? So there's a kind of a similar relationship with Daniel Penny and Derek Chauvin becoming heroes to the right. Okay, catching up on comments. Yes, the paper mache-alien shirt is still on Amazon. The pillbox says, the final experiment to the tip of the Antarctica has to be examined for gematria and numerology. Well, it's not even an experiment. It's an observation. And the question is there a 24-hour sun in Antarctica? And the problem with the videos that have been presented so far is people find glitches, they don't trust it. So the idea here is let's send some trusted believers in flat Earth to Antarctica and let them see for themselves. And so we're going to know next month. And whatever happens next month, it should immediately lead, I think, a lot of people away from this pointless conversation of flat versus round into media fakery analysis, because that's the primary issue here. Oh, thanks for the link, Diana South. I'll put the link in the minds.com. So we do have this shirt, Paper Mache-aliens, and it says believe. Now, we had our UFO hearings, but we didn't get any actual bodies. Or what do they call them? Biologics, EBEs. Polecat says Drake bet $355,000 on a Tyson win. He's notorious for bad sports bets, known as the Drake curse. Oh, that's funny. Yep, the Drake curse. The rapper has placed his Super Bowl bets. Drake curse in sports. Complete history and timeline. Okay, so that's a thing. He lost $1 million on Oilers, Mavericks, NBA Finals. I had no idea. He lost $1 million on, okay, Super Bowl 58. What else did he lose on? God, he is a real loser. I had no idea. Fans react to Drake reportedly betting a combined $800,000 on Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson. So if that's any indicator. Okay, we covered pretty much everything. I want to watch the fight. And again, if something happens, we will come back here immediately. We will reconvene. I want to close with this again. Sun Tzu, the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. And I think that's the bottom line here. We have been subdued. We have been conquered. Conquerors write the history, and it's called fake news. They fake our history day by day. I call it history telling. And the big script is what we're looking at. And the big Metascript would not be visible if you weren't stepping outside of the mainstream box and the alternative box. But you have to go all the way out to see it. You have to have the overview perspective. Kind of like you have to go so far from the earth to see it all. You have to step so far from their fictional universes to see it as a model separate from the real thing. You have to break that spell and step on the right side of the screen. And until you do, you're going to be in a state of philosophical crisis, confusion. You won't know real from fake. And as I said earlier, right now the main thing confronting us is visual illiteracy. We will no longer be able to trust what we see. And we have been over-reliant on trusting what we see. And that's where most of the lies come from. And they're the hardest to debunk because people think seeing is believing, which it shouldn't be at this point. I mean, the advent of deep fakery, which is just digital versions of old spycraft in disguise, but this alone should say that we should be in the age of disbelief by default. All right, this is Fepe Akbar featuring Lean Dion by Allergic to Bullshit. I'll see you all tomorrow or later tonight.
With your deception, keep it real, that's a profession. Like the whole world is pretending. Found the truth around the penguin. Get a gang on with a blessing. All the other gang is stressing. RPSC on a nesting. Only real ones gonna get this. Fake ones don't accept this. They can miss the message. Timbuktu got bodies, yeah. Find them in our wreckage. Auto host a message. Squad are represented. Killing you with knowledge, yeah. The uppers getting deaded. Oh, you're so effective. Cause we're so effective. Let go of your worries, yeah, the whole thing is a setup. We got it and we get it. Offering refreshment. Level up your conscience, yeah, it's honestly the essence. This wave is uncontainable. Facts are undebatable. You lanes are unrelatable. Give a fuck about saving you. We could keep on playing you. You just keep complaining too. Game is unescapable unless you're with the gang or no. Messing with the penguin. Messing with the penguin, 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 fucking with the penguins, yeah, with the penguins, coming with a vengeance, trying to make you come to your senses, forget the general consensus, just pay attention. The rules to hell is paid with good intentions. I'm clenching my back wrenching, representing only the most superior independent media. We got that real shit fucking encyclopedia. We're bringing an end to this mass hysteria. They wanna know why it's so serious, cause you must be delirious. If you're still believing stuff, get a grip and show some evidence for your own claims. We don't play no games, we stay relentless, exposing those events. Quick, the IPS are making an entrance. Busting doors down, cause now's the time for interventions that I mentioned. We're affecting so many men across the spectrum. We stand out from the crowd, we don't blend in. Steady gaining tremendous momentum. There's nothing close to resembling. Check the emblem, it's a penguin, not a gremlin. Just letting you know you're on an infinite plane, it's never bending. We strike like 10 pin, killing all fears and breaking the tension. Got another hoax army, digging deep in the trenches. Come and join in, be adventurous. Quit being so sensitive, forget the censorship. We ain't telling fibs.